somewhere in your house. Right now, there is a fire burning that you have forgotten about. A small blue flame under the water heater. A pilot light in the furnace. Down in the quiet part of the basement. It has been burning while you worked, while you traveled, while you slept. Years, maybe. Nobody tends it. It keeps its small watch in the dark, and it asks for nothing. The Greeks said every fire in every human house is a descendant. All of them. They said, come down from one ember, carried off a mountain at the edge of the sky, hidden inside the hollow stalk of a plant, by someone who knew exactly what it was going to cost him. He knew the cliff. He knew the chains. He knew the schedule of every morning that was coming for him. And he picked the ember up anyway. Tonight, I'm going to tell you his entire story. The war that put a young king on the throne of the sky. 2 portions of 1 ox. And a trick that changed the way the whole ancient world prayed. A woman built by committee. And the jar nobody warned her about. A flood. And 2 survivors throwing stones over their shoulders. A cliff at the edge of the world. A girl who was not allowed to stop walking. A secret that outweighed all the thunder in the sky. And an arrow. It starts at dusk. On a mountain. At the end of the worst day. His days are all the same. The worst one is everyone. Down the dark we go. If you were standing on that mountain this evening, the first thing you would notice is a speck in the western sky, getting smaller. It has somewhere to be. It came out of the east, at first light, the way it always does. And now the light is going, and it is leaving, the way it always leaves. Watch it a moment, a dark point against the last orange band of the day, riding the wind off the peaks, shrinking, shrinking, gone below the ridge line. That is all you need to know about it for now. It is gone, and it will not come back until morning. And that means the day is over. Now look around at where you are. The Greeks put this place at the far eastern edge of everything they knew. The Caucasus. They called it a wall of mountains standing between the world and whatever was not the world. So high that the poets said the peaks carried the weight of the sky on their shoulders. Past this point, their maps simply stopped. Traders did not come here. Roads did not come here. This is the kind of place a power chooses when it wants something kept. And kept far. And kept where no ordinary traveler will ever wander past and ask questions. Feel the place before you see the rest of it. The rock is grey and hard and old, scoured clean by wind that started blowing before there were ears to hear it and has never once let up. It is not a gentle wind. It comes across the high snowfields and down through the gorges, and it carries the cold of the ice with it. And when the sun drops, that cold rises up out of the deep places like water filling a basin. You can feel the temperature falling right now, degree by degree. The warmth of the day, letting go of the stone, and there is a sound underneath the wind, if you hold still for it. A faint metallic ticking, slow and irregular, coming off the cliff face. That is iron cooling. Metal expands in the sun all day and contracts again at dusk. And as it contracts, it ticks, link by link, like a great clock winding down. There is a lot of iron on this cliff. Now look up, because he is above you. You see the scale of him before you see anything else. The old poets never gave his exact height, and they did not need to, because he belongs to the generation before the gods, the generation of titans, the powers who were here when the world was still being furnished. He is stretched against the rock face, with his arms spread wide along the stone, the way a man stands when he is holding a wall up, or when a wall is holding him. The chains run from his wrists and his ankles into the mountain itself, driven deep, anchored past any leverage, and the workmanship on those anchors is clean and exact and terrible. Whoever set them was a craftsman, and cared about the work, and hated every minute of it. We will meet him later tonight. There are no guards. Sit with that a second. The most closely held prisoner in the history of the sky. And there is not one sentry on this mountain. The wind is the garrison. The distance is the wall. The chains were made by the finest hands in existence. And the one who ordered all of this understood something that every warden eventually learns, which is that a perfect prison needs nobody standing outside it. Then the last of the light goes off the peaks, and something changes. You can hear it change. His breathing. All day it has been one kind of breathing, and I am not going to describe that kind. And now, as the dark comes up the valley like a tide, it slows, it deepens, it lets go, muscle by muscle, the way your own breathing is letting go right now. There, in your bed, in your own courteous dark, because the night belongs to him. Out of everything he once had, the night is what he still owns. The speck does not fly in the dark. The dark is a truce, signed fresh every evening, and it has just been signed again. And for the next several hours, the only things on this mountain are the wind, and the stars, and him. So he does what he does at this hour. He looks down, far below the cliff, past the gorges and the foothills, and the long fall of the land toward the plains. The world of human beings is going to bed, and, scattered across that darkness, small as sparks off a struck flint, there are lights. Feed us. Dozens of them, then hundreds as the dark deepens. Each one a household. Pick one. Follow it down. A hut of mud brick and thatch at the edge of a plain, and inside it a banked hearth. Coals breathing under a blanket of ash, and beside the hearth a child asleep on a mat. One arm thrown out the way, sleeping children throw an arm out. An older figure crouches at the hearth a moment, adjusting a flat stone to block the draught, coming under the door, shielding the coals the way you would shield something precious. Because it is one. Nobody in that hut knows what the warmth cost. Nobody in any of the huts, under any of those small lights, in any direction. For as far as even his eyes can see, they were never told. The bill for every one of those fires was paid a very long time ago, in one lump sum, by the figure hanging in the dark above them all, and the paying of it is the whole story of tonight. So, here is the question to carry with you as you settle in, and it is the engine under everything you are about to hear. He is immortal. He was old when the mountains were new. Time costs him nothing, and those creatures down there live. What? 60 winters, 70 in a lucky family. They flicker in and out faster than he can learn their faces. What in the world could make a being like that trade away his freedom? Forever. For beings like them. He knows the answer. He has always known the answer. He knew it before he did the thing that put him on this rock. The fires below him were small and scattered, and his, every one of them. Tonight I will tell you how they got there, and what they cost. The night is long enough for all of it, and the night is his. The stars are not out yet. There is a grey stretch between the day ending and the first star showing, a kind of hallway between two rooms, and while we stand in it, I am going to tell you how his days work. I will tell it once, plainly, and then we will be done with it, because this story is not about the punishment. The punishment is just the frame around it. But you need the frame. So here it is. At first light, the speck comes up out of the sunrise. It is an eagle, and it is not an ordinary one. The old accounts give it a pedigree, a monstrous parentage, a place in the catalogue of things that should not exist. And they say It was assigned to this mountain, the way a soldier is assigned to a post. It comes out of the east with the first sun behind it, and it lands on him. And what happens next? The oldest account in existence spends exactly one line on. The bird eats what an immortal body can grow back. That is the whole line. That is all the ancient poet gave it. And that is all I am going to give it. Tonight, or any other time we pass this way, you have heard the rest somewhere before, in a classroom or a book. And if you have, you know which organ the Greeks meant. And you know they chose it because they believed it was the one part of a body that renews itself. Modern medicine, oddly enough, agrees with them. The detail is 3,000 years old, and it is still anatomically sound. And that is the last clinical thing I will say in this story. The bird works until dusk. At dusk, it leaves. You watched it leave a few minutes ago. And then the night does the opposite of what the day did. The immortal body, hour by dark hour, quietly repairs itself. It knits. It restores. By the time the sky pales in the east, everything the day took has been given back. Complete. Whole. Ready. Which is the point. Understand the design of this, because there is a cold intelligence in it that tells you everything about the king who ordered it. The sentence is not the wound. Wounds end. Even terrible ones arrive, and are suffered, and become the past. This sentence has no past. It is the repetition. Morning after morning after morning. Each one identical. Each one complete in itself. None of them ever becoming the last one. An ordinary prisoner serves his time. And the time, however slowly, moves. Right, this time does not move. It circles. And here is the worst part of the arithmetic. Only an immortal could serve this sentence at all. A mortal man on that rock would be released by his own death inside a day or two. Death is a door, and every mortal thing carries one. And the king who designed this punishment looked at his prisoner and saw a being with no door, and built the sentence around that. He took the one gift the Titans were born with, the deathlessness, the endlessness, and he turned it into the instrument. The prisoner's own nature is the lock. Whoever thought of that was not in a rage. Rage does not design. Rage lashes out and is done. This was drawn up, the way a builder draws up a plan. And we will meet the mind that drew it. And I promise you it will be more interesting than a villain. Now, how long? How long is a sentence like that supposed to run? Here the old sources start disagreeing with each other, and I want you to hear the disagreement, because we do not smooth those over on this watch. One tradition says the sentence was 30,000 years. Another counts it in generations, long ones, the lifespans of ages. Others simply say forever, and leave the bookkeeping out of it. Take the 30,000 if you want a number to hold. Hold it loosely, because the truth underneath all the versions is simpler and darker than any figure. Whatever the number was, it was never meant to arrive. Nobody who writes 30,000 years into a sentence is planning to be there for the release. The number is just the shape eternity takes when a clerk has to write it down. And yet, every design has a seam in it somewhere, and you have already seen the seam in this one. You watched it happen at the end of the last chapter, and maybe you did not notice. So I will point at it now. The bird does not fly at night. Nobody explains why. Maybe even a monster keeps hours. Maybe the dark at the edge of the world is too much, even for a thing with that pedigree. The accounts do not say. What they say, all of them, is that the healing happens in the dark, which means the dark was left to him every evening at dusk. A truce begins that no one ever signed out loud. The wind stays, the cold stays, but the schedule stops. And for those hours the mountain is just a mountain, and he is just a figure against the stone under the turning sky, breathing slow, watching the fires come out on the plains below like stars, answering stars. The night is the flaw in the sentence. The night is the mercy nobody intended. And tonight, as far as he knows, is a night like every other night, like 10,000 before it, like 10,000 more to come. The same wind, the same cold climbing out of the gorge, the same truce, running out the same hours toward the same grey morning. As far as he knows, hold on to those 4 words. They are the only thing tonight I will ask you to carry, and they weigh nothing at all. There, the first star is out, over the eastern ridge, right where he knew it would be. Now the second, now 3 more, all at once, in the places he knew they would be, because he knows this sky the way you know the ceiling of your own bedroom. Every star that is going to rise tonight, he knows by name. He should. He is the reason they have names. That takes some explaining, and the explaining starts a long way back, before the mountain, before the chains, before the king was a king, back when the world was run by an older management entirely, and the name Zeus was nothing but a rumor about a baby hidden in a cave. That is where his story begins. Let him rest a while, and come back with me. The first star is up over the eastern ridge now, white and steady, and he is looking at it. He has watched it rise from this rock more times than there are words for counting, but he watched it rise before the rock, too. He watched it rise over a world that had never heard of Zeus. Go back to that world with me. The memory starts here. Before the gods, you know, there was an older management. The Greeks called them Titans, and they were not gods the way you picture gods. Personalities with faces and grudges and favorite cities. The Titans were closer to the furniture of the universe. They were the powers that held things up and kept things turning. Enormous, slow, and old. And they ran the world the way a mountain range runs a continent, by being there, by being too big to argue with. At the head of them sat Cronus, who had taken the throne of the sky from his own father, and who ruled with the particular caution of a man who knows exactly how thrones change hands, and arranged below him the great houses of his family, each one holding up some corner of everything. One of those houses belonged to a Titan named Iapetus. Remember the name for 1 minute. Then you can let it go, because what matters is his sons. He had 4 of them, and the 4 of them are a study in how differently the same blood can run. The first was Atlas, broad, strong, loyal to the old order, built like the thing he would one day become, which is a load-bearing wall. The second was Mecone, and the old poets give him one trait, which is violence, a temper like dry brush, always one spark from burning. Keep those 2 in the back of your mind. The war that is coming will deal with both of them, and it will not deal with them gently. It is the 3rd and 4th sons who own tonight. The 3rd was called Prometheus. In Greek, the name comes apart into 2 pieces, and the pieces mean thinking afterward, the one who understands what happened once it has finished happening. And before you smile at that, be fair to him, because the world is full of Prometheus, and you have loved some of them. He was the brother who lived entirely in the present tense. He saw what was in front of him with total clarity and total delight. Afache, a meal, a warm afternoon, and the chain of consequences trailing behind every choice was simply invisible to him until it arrived. He was generous, because generosity never stops to calculate. He was happy, because dread requires a view of the future and he did not have one. People were drawn to him, People are always drawn to someone who is fully where they are. And the fourth son was Prometheus. The same two pieces make up his name. Turned the other way, thinking beforehand. Forethought. Now I have to be careful here, because it would be easy to make this sound like a magic trick. And it was not a magic trick. He did not watch the future the way you watch a movie. Complete. In color. From the best seat. Nothing in the old accounts says the future played for him like that. What he had was stranger and harder to live with. When he looked at a thing, he saw what the thing would do, show him an action, and the consequences of it stood up in his mind. And then the consequences of those consequences. A chain of falling pieces running out ahead of the present moment, further than anyone else could follow, where you or I see a choice. He saw the 10th move past it, and the 20th, the way a master sees a whole game in an opening. Picture the two brothers, one afternoon, sitting on the bank of a river. This is my image, and I will own it, but I am building it out of their names. So, it is honest work. They are watching the same water. Prometheus is watching it go. Look at that, where it caught the light just now. Gone already. Wonderful. And Prometheus is looking upstream, at the water that has not arrived yet, reading the color of it, the load of silt in it, knowing from the brown of the current that it rained in the mountains 2 days ago, and that the river will be over its banks by nightfall, and that the low pasture will flood, and that somebody should move the herds now, this afternoon, while moving them is still easy. And here is the part that mattered, the part that shaped his whole long life. When he said so, nobody moved the herds. That is the cost of the gift, and nobody ever talks about it. Being right about tomorrow buys you nothing today. Today, the sun is out and the pasture is dry and you sound like a warrior, and the ones who love you pat your shoulder, and the ones who do not roll their eyes. And either way, the herds stay where they are. Then the river rises in the night, exactly as you said. And in the morning nobody thanks you. Nobody thanks the man who was right. They avoid him, because standing next to him feels like standing next to the flood. So he learned to carry it quietly. He learned that a true thing said too early sounds exactly like a false thing, and that the loneliest position in the world is one move ahead of everyone you know. The other Titans found him useful and uncomfortable, in about that order, and they kept him the way you keep a good knife, close and a little warily. Cronus, on his high throne, never looked at him twice. Why would he? The universe was settled. The old powers held every corner of it, and the strength of them was past measuring. And strength was what the world ran on. It had never yet occurred to anyone that the world might someday run on something else. But south of the Titan strongholds, in the island country, there was a story starting to travel. A rumor. Servant to servant. Power to power. The kind of story that moves on its own legs. It said that the youngest child of Cronus had never been swallowed like the others, that the mother had handed the old king a stone wrapped in a blanket, and the old king, in his caution, in his certainty, had swallowed the stone. It said the child was real, and hidden, and growing, in a cave, on a mountain, on an island, being raised on goat's milk and honey out of the sight of heaven, Ababe, against the assembled foundations of the universe. It was a joke. Around the fires of the old powers it was told as one. Prometheus heard the story, and did not laugh. He looked at it the way he looked at rivers, and the chain of consequences stood up in his mind and ran out ahead of the world, further and further, all the way to the end. And what he saw there made him go very still. One brother understood everything after it happened. The other understood everything before. Between those two kinds of understanding, the whole of tonight is going to unfold, and a war was coming now, rolling up out of the future like weather off the sea. A war that would break the universe in half and set it up again under new management. Every power in creation would have to choose a side. Only one mind in the world had already finished fighting it. Wars between gods do not start with a shot. They start with a meeting. Come stand in this one. A hall of the old powers. Stone on a scale that has no business standing up. And around the great table the Titans are gathered in council. And the mood in the room is not fear. That is the thing to notice. The mood is confidence. The deep, settled confidence of beings who have never lost anything, because there has never yet been a war to lose. The hidden child is hidden no longer. He has come out of his cave, grown, and he has a name now, Zeus. And he has freed certain prisoners his father kept locked in the deep places, and he has made himself a fortress on a mountain called Olympus, and powers are rallying to him. The council has gathered to decide what to do about it, and the answer around that table is simple, because to them it is not even a question. We are stronger. We have always been stronger. We will go down and end this the way strength ends things, and the universe will go back to its arrangements. There is one figure at that council who is not saying anything. He is younger than the great old heads around the table, and he stands a little back from them, near the edge of the room, and he has already done the thing he cannot help doing. He has looked at this war the way he looks at rivers, and I can tell you what he saw, because the old drama that carries his name lets him say it himself. Years later, in chain, to anyone who will listen, he saw that this war would not be decided by strength. His mother had seen it too. The drama known as Prometheus Bound remembers her, a titaness of the deep places, old past counting, with the long sight running in her blood the way it ran in his. And it says the two of them read the same future. Victory in the coming war would go to cunning, to craft, to the side that thought, and planned, and allied, and waited. Muscle would lose. It was already written in the shape of things, the way the flood is written in the color of the river. So he stood up in front of the assembled strength of the universe, and he told them, "Fight this with your minds." He said, "Fight it with patience, with alliances, with the things you have never needed because you have never been challenged. Do that, and you keep the world. Fight it with your hands, and you lose everything." And the great old heads around that table did what people around tables have done to every early truth ever spoken. They laughed, not cruelly, even. That is almost the worst part. They laughed the way you laugh at a child who has said something clever and absurd. And then they went back to planning the war they intended to win with their hands. He tried again. The old accounts say he counseled them more than once, and was set aside more than once. And there is no version anywhere in which they listened. So he was left standing where his kind of mind is always left standing, alone, holding a truth with no takers, watching the people he belonged to walk steadily toward a cliff that only he could see. And that is the hour he made the first great choice of his life, the one that everything else tonight hangs from. He walked out of the old world, and he went to the new one. He crossed over to Zeus. Understand what the crossing cost, because he did not cross alone in the way that matters. His brothers stayed. Atlas stayed, loyal wall that he was, and took command in the field for the old order. Mecone stayed, and burned for the fight. The house of Iapetus split down the middle, the way houses split in every civil war. And when Forethought walked into the camp of the enemy, he walked in carrying the knowledge, cold and exact, of what was going to happen to the ones he left behind. He had seen it. He went anyway. Sit with how that must have felt, and then keep it, because it is not the last time Tonight this being will walk into something with his eyes open. The war itself. I am going to give you the way the old poets gave it, which is big and fast. 10 years. That is the number the oldest account keeps. 10 years of a war between the stories of the universe. The old powers hurling mountains. The young ones answering with fire out of the split sky. The sea boiling back from the coasts. The earth ringing like something struck. The poets reach for scale and keep failing. And the failing is the description. There had never been anything like it. There has never been anything like it since. And in the middle of it all, exactly as the quiet voice at the council had said, the war turned on craft. The young side thought. The young side made alliances. Zeus went down into the deep prisons of the world and freed what his father had been too proud and too frightened to use. The makers, the builders, the ones with 100 hands, the ones with one eye, and out of gratitude the makers forged him something new, a weapon nobody had ever held before. The thunderbolt, lightning, made into a thing a hand could throw. Strength lost. It lost slowly, and then it lost all at once. The way strength loses. The old order was beaten to its knees, and the floor of the universe opened, and the losing side went down into Tartarus, the pit below the world, as far under the earth as the sky stands over it, and gates were shut on them that will not open while anything lasts. Menoetius went down into the dark. His own brother, Atlas, got a different sentence, crueler in its way, and you already know it. He was marched to the western edge of everything and given the sky itself to hold. Forever. The punishment fitted to the loyalty. The wall made into a wall. His own brother. Forethought had called every piece of it. The ruin of his house arrived exactly on the schedule he had read years before at the council table. And being right had never in his life felt worse. And none of it was over. Because after every war comes the part the poets skip, the paperwork. The new king sat down to organize the universe. And this he did well. Say that plainly. Because tonight is not interested in a cartoon villain. Zeus had won the sky by thinking. And now he ordered it by thinking. He portioned out the world like a man settling an estate. To his brothers, the sea and the underworld, to the powers who had stood with him. Honors, offices, province, each according to service. Every god got a share. Every goddess got a share. The universe was inventoried, and assigned, and signed for. And there came a day when the new order stood complete. Every power in creation holding its portion, and at the right hand of the throne, honored, trusted, listened to, stood the Titan who had crossed over, the counselor whose counsel had put the crown where it was. Hold that picture, the king on the new throne, and Forethought standing beside it. Nobody in that bright hall could have imagined that the mountain at the edge of the world was already waiting for one of them, or that the other one would be the king who sent him there. The one who would hang in the chains was the one who had built the throne. No poet in the ancient world ever wrote that sentence down. The pieces sit side by side in the same old books, and nobody ever added them up. So you and I just did it ourselves. Here, in the dark, the new king handed out portions to every power in the sky, and every power in the sky took one and went home satisfied. And far below all of that bright accounting, down on the cooling floor of the world, out on the plains and in the caves, at the edges of the forests, there was one kind of creature standing in line that nobody had thought to call forward. It is raining down there. Come down out of the bright hall with me, all the way down, through the cloud, through the weather, to the floor of the world. because I want you to see what got left out of the inventory. There is an overhang of rock at the edge of a plain, not a cave. A cave would be luck, and these creatures have not had any. Just a shelf of stone leaning out over a patch of dry ground, and the rain coming down past the lip of it in a grey curtain. And underneath, pressed back against the rock, a huddle of living things. Look at them a while. The rain is loud and they are not going anywhere. So take your time. They are small. That is the first thing. Small and thin-skinned and wet, and they are folded around each other for warmth the way coals are banked. The old ones in the middle, the young ones tucked into the gaps. They shiver in long waves that run through the whole huddle, one body to the next. Their eyes are open. It is dark, and it is cold, and they are awake, because the dark and the cold will not let them be anything else. Now do what he did. The first time, he stopped to really look at them, take the measure of what they were given. The wolf out there in the rain has a coat that sheds this weather, 2 layers deep, and the wolf is comfortable tonight. These creatures have skin and a little hair that holds the wet against them. The birds felt this storm coming days ago, and rose, and rode the high wind south, and are standing in warm marshes right now. These creatures have legs, and the legs are slow. Slower than everything that hunts them, and slower than everything they hunt. The bear smelled the turn of the season in the air last month, and is asleep in the earth as we stand here. Heart barely ticking, wrapped in its own fat and fur, and it will not feel this winter at all. These creatures feel every hour of every night of it. Claws, none. Fangs, none worth the name. Armor, none. Poison, none. Wings, none. Night eyes, none. When the sun goes down, their world shrinks to the reach of an arm, and everything that wants them can see them, and they can see nothing, and the lives are short. That is the part that would stop you. If you were an immortal standing in the rain, looking in, 60 winters, and that is a lucky one. They flicker, by the measure of the beings who had just divided up the universe. These things arrive and are gone, like sparks going up off a fire. Too fast to learn, too fast to matter. Gone before you have finished turning to look at them. That is the animal. That is the whole kit it was issued. Now, how did it end up this way? Here the old tellers part company, and you should hear the versions, because this is one of those places where the disagreement is half the pleasure. There is a story, and it is a later one, that when the animals were being fitted out, the job of handing round the gifts went to Prometheus. Afterthought, the brother who lived in the present tense, and by the terms of the story he did the work with all the generosity in his nature, which was a great deal. Speed to the deer. There you are. Wings to the birds. Of course. Take them. Armor to the tortoise. Venom to the snake. Cunning to the fox. On and on down the line. Open-handed. Delighted. Until every fine thing in the sack had been given away. And then, at the end of the line, patient, last, stood human beings, and Afterthought looked in the sack, and the sack was empty. It is the most Prometheus story ever told, which is exactly why some old teller invented it, and why it stuck. And there is another tradition, later still, that goes further, and says the creatures under that rock were his work in the first place, that Prometheus shaped them himself, out of earth and water, clay and rain, in his own hands, moulding them the way a potter moulds, in the image of the powers above. It is a beautiful idea. The maker rescuing his own make, and the Romans loved it and passed it down. And it is probably the version you half remember from some book of myths you had as a child. But the oldest tellers, the ones closest to the beginning of this story, say neither thing. In the oldest accounts, nobody made these creatures, and nobody shorted them at the counter. They were simply there, the way grass was there, part of the world's furniture, unassigned, unclaimed. And tonight I will not claim more than the oldest tellers claimed. Where they left it open, we leave it open. Choose the version you like, or hold all three. Which is what I do, because whichever way they got there, the ledger comes out the same. Every other living thing had been given its one advantage. These had been given nothing, and were still here. And that is the thing he saw. Stand him in the rain now. The tall figure at the edge of the firelight this story does not have yet. The counselor of the new king, out walking the floor of the world, stopped at a distance, watching the huddle under the rock. Any other power in the sky, passing this spot, would have seen exactly what Zeus saw whenever he happened to glance down. Failure, a design that did not take, kindling that never caught, damp and shivering, waiting for the weather to finish it off. Forethought looked longer, because looking longer was what he was, and what he saw was not the list of things missing. He saw an old one in that huddle, at the center, in the warm spot. Turn that over. The warm spot in the middle was going to the weakest body, not the strongest. That is a strange arithmetic for an animal. Strength would put the strong in the middle. Something else had arranged this huddle, and it was not strength. He saw a mound of turned earth out past the overhang, at the edge of the trees, with a flat stone set on top of it. One of them had stopped being alive, and the rest had not left it where it fell. They had carried it, and dug for it, and covered it, and marked the place. No wolf marks a place. He stood in the rain and looked at the little mound a long time, reading it the way he read rivers, and the chain of consequences that stood up in his mind from that one flat stone ran out further than any he had ever followed. They knew, was what the stone said. They knew what was coming for them. Each of them, all of them. They were the one animal on the whole floor of the world that had seen its own ending in advance. In their small way, they had his gift, the terrible one, the seeing ahead, and they had looked at what was ahead, the cold and the dark and the mound of earth at the end of it, and they had drawn together under this rock and put the weakest one in the warm spot anyway. They were not failed animals. There was no quit in them at all. What they lacked was not will. It was means. And to the one mind in the universe, built for reading consequences, the sight of will without means was not pitiful. It was the most interesting thing on the entire floor of the world, because will without means is kindling without a spark. It is complete. It is stacked and dry and ready. It is one small thing short of being fire. Zeus looked down at the same creatures and saw kindling that had failed to catch. Prometheus looked down and saw kindling. The difference between those two ways of looking is the rest of this story. He came back. Is the thing. That is how you know what had begun. Not once. He came back and stood at the edge of their darkness and watched them. Season after season. The way you go back to a problem you have not solved yet. And the problem got into him the way problems do. And somewhere in those seasons, the problem quietly turned into something the old accounts never bother to name, and do not need to. And while he watched them, up in the bright new hall above the weather, the accounting of the universe was arriving at its final item. The old business between gods and mortals had never been formally settled. Who owes what to whom? What portion of every good thing belongs to heaven? And what portion may the creatures keep? The new king ran an orderly sky, and an orderly sky does not leave such things vague. And so the word went out across the world, to every power and every mortal creature in it. There would be a meeting, one place, one day, everything settled, binding forever. The place was a plain called Mecone. Every arrangement that runs the world got decided in a room somewhere, on some particular afternoon, by particular parties, and almost nobody ever gets to see it happen. Tonight you do. This is the afternoon the terms between heaven and humanity got set, and they are still, in a manner of speaking, the terms. So pay attention to the table, the plain of Mecone, in the morning light. The Greeks put it in the country near what would later be Sicyon, ordinary rolling ground, grass and stone and sky, chosen, the way neutral ground is always chosen, for being nobodies. On one side of the gathering, the powers of the new order, tall as weather, bright as noon. On the other side, the creatures from under the rock, standing in the grass in their small, ragged numbers, squinting, because they had never been this close to that much light. And between the two parties, an ox. That was the agenda. It sounds absurd until you see what it is, and then it never sounds absurd again. The ox was the first great question of the new age, standing there in the grass with its tail switching, and the question was this: when a mortal kills a beast, and the smoke of it goes up, what part belongs to the sky, and what part stays on the earth? Settle that, and you have settled the whole relationship. You have decided, forever, what the creatures owe, and what they keep, and which way the richness of the world flows. It was the tax code of existence, being written on a table of grass, and, standing at the center of the meeting, trusted by both sides, the only being in creation with a foot in each camp, was the counselor, the Titan who had crossed over, heaven's advisor, and the watcher at the edge of the huddle. They gave him the knife. Both sides. Let forethought make the division, and let the king choose his portion first, and let it stand forever. Everyone agreed. It was the last thing everyone ever agreed on. Now watch his hands, because the old poet slows down here, and so will we. He slaughtered the ox and he broke it down the way a master breaks down an animal. Joint finding joint, nothing wasted. And as he worked, he sorted 2 piles, growing in the grass, and what he was actually building, only he knew. Into the first pile went everything worth having, the meat, all of it, the shoulders and the haunches, the rich inner parts, everything that feeds and strengthens and satisfies. And when the pile was complete, he took the ox's stomach, the paunch, grey, wet, wrinkled, the least promising object on the whole plain, and he sewed the good things up inside it. Finished. It sat there in the grass, looking like exactly what it looked like. Awful. A bag of guts. Something you would step around. Into the second pile went the bones. All of them. White and clean and bare. Not a mouthful of nourishment in the whole stack. And these he dressed. He laid over them the caul fat, the rich white lace of fat that wraps an animal's insides, layer upon layer, sculpting it, and fat was the glory of a feast in that old world, the shine and the smell and the crackle of it. And when he stepped back, the second pile gleamed in the morning light like a hill of plenty. It was magnificent. It was the best-looking portion ever assembled. It was a monument with nothing inside. Then he stepped back from both piles and turned to the King of the universe in front of the assembled world and said the words, "Choose, Lord, whichever portion you take is heaven's forever, Stop here with me one moment, because you are standing at one of the great hinges, and I want you to feel the size of what is being risked. This is the counselor whose counsel won the war. His position is perfect. His standing could not be higher, and he is spending all of it, every bit, on a trick at a butcher's table. And the beneficiaries are a species of shivering animal that no other power in the sky has ever once looked at twice. Whatever you decide tonight about why, notice first what it cost him to want anything at all on their behalf. Zeus looked at the two portions. He looked at the gleaming hill of fat. He looked at the grey bag of guts. And he reached out both hands, in front of everything that existed, and took the beautiful one. The fat came away, and there, underneath, white and clean and bare, were the bones. Nothing, a stack of nothing, dressed to shine. Here is where I have to slow the story to a stop, because what happened inside the king in that moment is the most argued about silence in the whole tale. And the oldest teller we have is arguing with himself right on the page. He says Zeus was deceived, and his heart filled with anger. Then, lines later, as if the poet could not quite make himself believe it, he says, the king saw the trick the moment he looked at the piles, saw it and chose the bones anyway, with his eyes open, already composing in his heart what it would let him do. Both versions, side by side, from the same ancient hand, and no teller since has ever settled them. And I am not going to be the one who starts, but hold the two of them up and look at what each one gives you. The first gives you an angry king, tricked in public, made a fool of at his own founding ceremony, lashing out. That king is dangerous the way a storm is dangerous, and storms pass. The second gives you something else entirely, a king who saw the trap and stepped into it deliberately, because being wronged, visibly, officially, in front of everyone, is a currency. A king who understood that the trickster had just handed him a grievance that would justify anything he chose to do next, and who paid one pile of bones for it, and considered it cheap. That king is dangerous the way winter is dangerous. Winter does not pass because you wait. I know which version keeps me awake. And before we leave the table, one strange thing, the strangest on the whole plane. The trick worked. It stuck. From that morning on, through the entire history of the ancient world. This was the deal, and everyone lived by it, in every Greek city, at every altar, for 1,000 years and more. When the smoke went up to heaven, what burned inside it was the bones and the fat, the white smoke of nothing, rising off 10,000 altars, every day, for centuries, and the meat stayed below, and mortals ate it, every feast in every square, every festival, every wedding, all of it. Humanity eating the portion Forethought stole for them at that table. Generation after generation after generation. The gods kept the receipt of the fraud and mortals kept the goods, and that arrangement outlived every empire that honored it. He won. Understand that clearly. At the table, on the day, in front of everyone. He won completely. Zeus did not raise his voice. There is no thunder in any account of that afternoon. The king of the universe stood over the unwrapped bones and looked at them a long moment, and then looked up, past the crowd, past the counselor, at the small ragged creatures standing in the grass at the edge of the assembly, the ones the trick had been arranged for, squinting in the light of powers they could barely look at, waiting to find out what the morning had decided about the rest of their existence. And the king decided. If they were going to eat like the favored of heaven, they could do it in the dark. He took the fire. Nobody saw it leave. That is the first thing to understand about what the king did. There was no storm. No decree read out over the plains. No visible hand reaching down. There was simply an evening, somewhere on the floor of the world, when a woman knelt at a cold hearth with her fire drill and her dry moss and her handful of tinder, and did everything right. Everything her mother had taught her, and nothing happened. Spin. Rest. Spin. The little curl of smoke that should have come up off the wood did not come up. She checked the moss. Dry. She checked the drill. True. She spun until her palms burned, and the burning in her palms was the only heat anywhere in that house. And somewhere in the second hour she sat back on her heels and understood, without any way of saying it, that the world had changed its rules. It was the same in the next house. It was the same in the next valley. Whatever fire was already burning, those first days, became the most guarded thing on earth, banked and fed and watched over like a failing elder. And one by one, through carelessness, through rain, through a gust under a door in the night, the fires that existed went out, and no new fire could be born. The king had not smashed anything. He had simply repossessed one element, quietly, completely, the way only an owner can. And the world below found out the way. You find out a bridge is gone. By arriving at the edge of it in the dark, come stand in one village through what followed. One is enough. It stands near the tree line at the foot of the hills, a cluster of low houses, and at the center of the main house there is a hearth of flat stones. And the hearth is the first thing you would notice now, because it sits in the middle of everything, like a wound that will not close, black, cold, swept clean, because the woman of the house cannot stand to look at dead ash. And still nobody in the family will walk across it. A month ago it was the center of the world. The cooking happened there. The mending happened around it. The old man told his stories facing it. The children fell asleep in the warm reach of it. Every path in the house bent toward that spot, the way paths bend toward water. Now the paths bend around it, and the house has no center, and the family you can barely see in the gloom sits pressed against the far wall, wrapped in everything they own. Feel what the cold does when it has no answer anywhere. This is a different cold from a hard night in a warm age. This cold has moved in. It gets into the water jars, so that every drink hurts. It gets into the joints of the old man's hands, so that they stop working by evening. The children sleep in one pile like the creatures under the overhang all those ages ago, and the family has, without one word spoken about it, gone back to the oldest arithmetic, the weakest body in the warmest spot. Everything Forethought once read in that arrangement is still true. The will is all still there. The means are gone again. And the food, the meat won at Mecone, the whole rich portion of humanity's victory, hangs from the rafters in strips, and it is eaten raw now, cold and tough, swallowed in hard lumps for fuel and nothing more. Chewing takes half the evening. The fat that should be crackling and running over a flame sits waxy on the tongue. They won the meat, and lost the eating of it. Sit with the design of that a moment. Whichever version of the king you carried out of Mecone, notice that the punishment lands exactly, precisely, on the shape of the crime. You would almost admire it, if you were not standing in this house. At night the forest comes closer. It does not really. Of course, the trees are where the trees have always been. But the border between the village and the wild was never made of anything but light. One ring of firelight pushing the dark back 30 feet. And 30 feet was the whole difference between a home and a hole. Now the dark comes all the way to the door, and stands there. Some nights, in it, there are eyes. The animals learned fire ages ago, learned the one rule, that the bright circle is not theirs, And they kept the rule as long as the circle held. The circle is gone now. The eyes at the tree line hang there in the black, patient, unhurried, working out at their own pace what the missing light means. And everyone inside the house lies awake, listening to the dogs deciding whether to bark. The clay pit at the edge of the village has gone still. The pots half formed on the drying boards will never harden past leather, and will slump with the first rain, because clay becomes stone in only one school. Up the valley, the seam of greenish rock that the old man swears will weep metal if you cook it hot enough sits unopened in the hillside. A locked door with the key confiscated. No lamp goes into the deep caves now. So the deep caves are gone. The dark parts of the world all just got larger, and the human part got exactly as small as the daylight. In the logic of the myth, taking the fire away did more than darken the night. It closed every road that might have led anywhere past it. The road to the metals. Closed. The road to the hardened pot. To the lit cave. To the winter crossing. To the shore beyond the cold water. Closed. 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 A creature that lives by its hands had been left its hands and nothing for them to work with. Kindling. Stacked and dry and ready. And the spark, not merely withheld now, but banished. On the personal order of the owner of all sparks. High on the mountain at the edge of the world. In the dark of tonight, the figure in the chains remembers those years better than he remembers his own sentence. The old accounts do not say that. I do. But look at where he chose to spend the ages before his arrest. Down at the edge of that darkness, watching, and tell me the memory is not still in him. His own nights now are cold past anything that village ever knew. And the cold is not the part of the punishment he minds. Because here is what those years came down to. The thing he could see from the edge of the tree line. Reading the dark village. The way he once read rivers. The creatures were not dying out. That would almost have been cleaner. They were enduring. The one thing they knew how to do. Huddling deeper. Chewing longer. Burying their dead with colder hands. And every season of it wore them down by one more degree. And the line of the wearing ran out ahead of them, in his mind. Long and shallow and pointed nowhere. Endurance with no road out is just a slower ending. He had given them the meat, and it had bought them this. His first great gift to humanity was starving them in the dark. And no one in the sky was ever going to relent. And he knew it. Because he knew the king. And the fire was not gone. That is the detail that finishes this chapter. So hold it up and look at it. The fire was not gone from the world. It was gone from their world. On the mountain of the gods, it burned exactly as it had always burned. In the high halls, on the bright terraces, and, hottest of all, in one particular place, a workshop cut into the flank of Olympus itself, where a lame craftsman god kept his forges roaring day and night, turning out wonders for beings who were never cold, all the flame in creation, gathered up and locked behind one address, burning for the comfort of powers who could not feel winter, while the only creatures in existence who actually needed it lay stacked together in the dark like firewood. You could see it from below, is the thing, on clear nights. From the high pastures, the mountain of the gods showed a faint warm glow against the stars, the way a rich house up the hill shows its windows to the cold road. The creatures could see the light of the thing they were dying without, and somewhere between that glow and that darkness, on the slopes no mortal climbed, a tall figure was walking uphill in the night, unhurried, the way you walk when the decision was made a long time ago, and the walking is a formality, and in his hand, swinging easy at his side, he carried a walking staff, a dry stalk of giant fennel, taller than a man, thick as a wrist, hollow at the heart. He had already measured everything. Before anything happens on that mountain tonight, You need to meet the plant, because the plant is the whole plan, and the plan is older than tonight. Giant fennel does not look like much of a hero. It grows on dry hillsides all over that country, stands taller than a man in good years, and by late summer it dies where it stands, and dries where it died. The stalk that is left is light as bone and looks like nothing, a hollow reed on a big scale, ridged, tough-skinned, with a knuckle at every joint. But split one open, and the inside of it is the secret. The core is packed with a white pith, dry as old paper, soft as felt, and that pith takes an ember the way a wick takes oil. Here is what that means in practice. And this is real. This is not myth. Set a live coal into the pith at the heart of a fennel stalk, and the coal does not flare, and it does not die. It smoulders. It creeps along the core, slow as a resting heartbeat, eating inward down the stalk an inch at an hour, and the thick outer skin holds the heat in so completely that a man can carry the stalk in his bare hand, walking all day, and feel nothing but a faint warmth, like a living thing sleeping against his palm. The fire rides inside, hidden, banked, breathing through the joints. Shepherds in the Greek hills were carrying fire exactly this way, in exactly this plant, within living memory. Ask an old man from those villages. The trick outlived the gods who were robbed by it. So understand what the Titan was actually holding. That night, on the slopes of Olympus, to every eye in creation, a walking staff. In fact, of shell, the only container in existence that could hold the property of Zeus and show nothing, sealed by nature itself, designed by no one, waiting on a hillside since the beginning of the world for someone to notice what it was. Forethought had noticed. Forethought was the noticing of things, walking around on legs. Now come up the mountain, quietly, and watch how a perfect theft is done. The old accounts disagree, gently, about where in the high country the fire actually came from, and I will give you the versions when the night is older. What the version we are walking keeps is the forge, the workshop of the craftsman god, cut into the mountain's flank below the summit halls, and even at this dead hour you can find it with your eyes shut, because a forge is never truly cold. The great fires are banked for the night. The bellows hang still. The hammers lie in their racks, and the whole cavern breathes a deep orange quiet. The coals settling under their blanket of ash with small ticking sighs, the way iron on a distant cliff will one day tick in the dusk. There are no guards. Sit with that one more time, because it matters here too. Nobody guards fire on Olympus. Guarding it has never once crossed any immortal mind, because theft is a crime of the needy, and nothing on this mountain has ever needed anything. The tall figure stands in the doorway a moment, listening to the coals. He knows this room. That is the part of the story nobody dwells on, and the part that would have stopped me cold if I were telling it for the first time. He is not a burglar in a strange house. He is the counselor of the crown. Welcome everywhere. Familiar here. A friend of the lame god, whose fires these are. He has stood in this workshop 100 times on honest business. The theft of fire was committed by the one being in the sky who did not have to break in. And every step he takes across that floor is a step across a friendship. And he takes the steps anyway. And if they cost him anything, the poets kept no record of it. I think they cost him. You can think what you like. The record is silent. And on this watch we say so. At the great hearth he kneels. He draws the fennel stalk from under his cloak and opens the seam he has already cut in it. A hand's width of the tough skin lifted like a little door above the white pith. Then, bar-fingered, unhurried, he reaches into the banked fire and sorts through it, past the grey coals, past the orange, to one small ember burning steady at the heart of the bank, the size of an acorn, the size of a thumbnail. He lifts it out the way you would lift a sleeping bird, and he lays it in the pith, and the pith takes it with one thin thread of smoke, and he closes the little door of bark over it, and stands, and the room looks exactly as it looked. Nothing is missing that any eye could count. The property of Zeus, entire, is a point of heat riding at the heart of a walking stick, and the greatest theft in the history of the universe weighs less than the stick did yesterday. Down the mountain now, the long way, the dark way, and this is where the story earns its quiet, because there is nothing in this walk but the walk, and everything in the world is riding on it. No guards chase him, no eye has opened. The danger is not behind him, and that is exactly the terror of it. The danger is in his hand. One ember, one wind. The high slopes of Olympus are a country of wind, gusts that come off the summit like something thrown, and every one of them is aimed, as far as he is concerned, at a point of heat the size of an acorn. He walks with the stalk carried close, his body between the wind and the seam, the way the woman in the dark village once shielded her last coals, the way a figure in a hut will shield a banked hearth on the night this story ends. Downhill, in the dark, one careful league after another, an immortal being, walking at the pace of the mortal thing he is carrying. Feel the stalk with him, that faint warmth against the palm. Alive, sleeping. One stumble from gone. Now hold still, because here is the thing you have to carry for the rest of the night. He was forethought. Seeing consequences was not something he did. It was the thing he was. The way falling is what a stone is. The way flowing is what a river is, which means that on this walk, on this dark hillside, right now, with the ember warm against his hand, he is not hoping to get away with it. He has already seen the cliff. He has seen the grey rock and the colour of it at dusk. He has seen the chains, and the craftsman who will be ordered to set them, and the exact grief on the craftsman's face, his friend's face, the friend whose fire is riding right now inside the stalk. He has seen the eagle coming up out of the sunrise, and he has counted the mornings, and the count ran on past every horizon. His long sight owns, and his sight owns them all. Every step downhill tonight is a step he has already watched himself take from the far side of the sentence. The theft and the punishment are, to him, one single object, seen whole, the way you can hold up a year and see both ends of it. He is not gambling. There is no gamble anywhere on this mountain. He is purchasing, at a price he has read to the last day. And the walking is just the signature going onto the contract, stride by stride by stride. There is no comfortable word for that. Courage is the wrong size. Courage hopes. This does not hope. This knows, and goes anyway. And if you want to understand why this story has never once let go of the human race in 3,000 years, it is because every one of us privately suspects that knowing would stop us. And here is the one who knew to the last morning, still walking downhill. The lights of the world below are not lights. Of course, that is the point. The plains at the foot of the mountain are pure black, black as the bottom of the sea, a country of banked misery with not one spark in it from edge to edge. He walks down into that blackness carrying the only fire on earth that is out of heaven's hands. And somewhere down there on the flats, near the tree line, he stops at last, at the edge of a village he has stood at the edge of before. What happened next? No poet staged, and no pot painter ever caught. The oldest tellers give it half a line. He stole the fire and gave it to mortals. And the sentence rolls on to the anger of Zeus, as if the middle of it were nothing, as if the hinge of the whole human story deserved less ink than an ox. So the scene belongs to us, and we will keep it as small and as true as it must have been. A doorway, a figure crouched inside it, awake, in the cold, the way they were always awake. A tall stranger kneeling in the dark outside, laying a walking staff on the ground, opening a little door in the side of it, and a glow, the first glow on the floor of the world in a long age, small as a coin, lighting two faces from below. He showed them the ember bedded in the pith. He showed them how to feed it. Dry moss, thin bark, patience, breath. He watched the first new flame in the history of their kind stand up off the tinder and steady itself, and he gave them the first rule, the one rule, the rule their descendants would keep for 10,000 years, in hearths and temples and pilot lights, without ever once remembering where it came from. Do not let it go out. He could not teach them everything in one night. He gave them the ember and the first rule, and then he stepped back into the dark to see what they would do with it. What they did with it is the next 10,000 years. Stay in the village. Do not follow him back into the dark. For this one chapter, the story does not belong to titans or kings or anyone with an immortal name. It belongs to the people in the hut, and we might imagine it this way, because somebody lived it this way. Some night, at the beginning of everything, the flame is standing up off the tinder now, a hand tall, yellow, swaying with the draughts, and the family is in a circle around it at a distance that keeps changing, because nobody knows yet how close is close. That is the first thing to understand about this night. Nobody in this hut knows anything. The old man knew fire. Once. Decades of it. But his fire was the old fire. The fire that was simply always there. Inherited coal to coal from his grandmother's hearth. Tending is not making, and even his tending is half a lifetime rusty. And the children have never seen this thing at all. There is a boy in this hut, 6, 7 years old, born after the world went dark, and he is looking at the first fire of his entire life. Watch this night through him, as much as we can. He learns the way every human being since has learned, which is by getting it slightly wrong. He puts his hand out toward the light, because it is beautiful, and the beautiful things he knows are things you touch. And the heat meets his palm, a full arm's length, before his palm arrives anywhere. He snatches the hand back, holds it to his chest, looks at the fire with an expression the species is inventing right now. On his face, this instant, respect and want in equal parts. At war, neither one winning. Then he puts the hand out again, slower, and finds the exact distance where the heat stops, being a wall, and becomes a gift. And he holds his palm there, right at the border. And that border, that precise line in the air, is where human beings have lived ever since. The smoke finds everyone in the first hour. The hut has no thought of a smoke hole yet. Why would it? And the family learns by watering eyes and raw throats that the burning makes a breath of its own, and that the breath rises, and that you sit low, under it, in the sweet clear air near the floor. Somebody's coughing turns into laughing halfway through. It is the first laughing in that hut in a long time. Nobody remarks on it. It is remarkable. The old man appoints himself keeper, because he is the one with fragments of the old knowledge, and some of the fragments even turn out to be true. He feeds the flame twigs first, then branch wood, and pronounces, with an authority he does not entirely feel, that thick wood is for later, for the settled fire, and he turns out to be right, and his standing in the household rises in a way that will never entirely come down. When the flames gutter on a green stick, he leans in and blows, low and steady, and the fire swells with his breath, like a thing agreeing with him. And the children's faces, watching that, are the faces of people watching a man negotiate with a spirit and win. And the night goes on, and the fire does its quiet, enormous work, and the hut begins to change shape around it. The meat comes down from the rafters. The woman cuts strips of the hard, raw stuff of the last years and lays them on a flat stone shoved close against the coals. And nobody in this family has ever smelled what happens next. Understand that. The smell of meat roasting, the smell that is older than every language, the brown, rich, rising smell that means home and plenty and evening in every human place that has ever existed, is filling this hut for the first time in living memory. And the children have no name for it and cannot stop turning toward it. The fat starts to talk on the stone. When they eat, at last, burning their fingers because patience has limits. It is soft, and it is warm, and warmth is going into them from the inside now, as well as the outside. And the eating takes minutes instead of half the evening, and it leaves them, for the first time in their short lives, with the one thing hunger and cold had always eaten first: spare time, an evening, an hour with nothing in it that has to be done. Hold that thought. It comes back at the end of this chapter, and it is carrying the whole future. Deep in the night, the eyes come to the tree line. They were always going to come. Whatever owns those eyes has spent years learning the new rules of the dark. And the new rules said the village was food that had not finished happening. So the eyes arrive on their usual patrol, low and patient out there in the black, and what they find is a border, light, standing in a ring around the doorway. 30 feet of firm, bright ground, where 30 feet of darkness used to be. The eyes stop at the line. Nobody in the hut sees the moment, and it is one of the biggest moments in the whole story. The oldest law of the living world has just been reinstated. The bright circle is not yours. Everything with claws relearns it at that tree line over the following weeks. Generation of predator after generation of predator arriving at the light and stopping, and the stopping goes into their blood so deep that their descendants will circle human campfires 10,000 years from now. Close enough to be heard, and never one step past the shine. Inside the circle, the family sleeps, all of them, at the same time. No watcher propped awake against the wall, listening for the dogs, because the fire is the watcher now, and it does not doze. 2 of the children have fallen asleep, sitting up, mid-sentence, the way children do, and have been laid down where they slumped, and the boy is one of them, and his open hand is stretched toward the hearth, as if even asleep. He is holding his palm at the border of the warmth, which he is, which we all have been ever since. And the last thing, the thing I have kept for the end, because it is my favorite thing in this whole night. Sometime before sleep took them, they saw each other. You have to feel your way into how strange this is. For years, night in that hut has been a blindness, voices in the dark, bodies known by weight and breath, the family dissolving every dusk into a black in which a mother could not see the face of the child against her side. Every human being on earth vanished from every other human being, every single night. At sundown, that was the deal. That had always been the deal. Now there is light after dark, and inside its circle, for the first time, the family is looking at itself, the old man's face with the firelight moving on it, every crease deep and gold, the woman's face, off her guard, for once, soft, the children, lit from below, eyes enormous. They look at each other across the flame longer than anyone has ever looked at anyone, because the looking was never possible before, and the fire moves, and the shadows move with it, and every face is alive twice over, once with itself and once with the light. For the first time since the world was made, night had a center, one fire, on one hearth floor, in one hut, on the whole dark face of the earth. By morning there were two, because a neighbor came to the doorway at first light, drawn by the smell of smoke, the way the whole species was about to be, and stood there staring, and went home walking fast, carrying a burning branch held out in front of him like a lantern, like a flag, like a firstborn. And that, the carrying, turned out to be the whole invention. Fire you can keep is warmth. Fire you can pass is a future. High on the cliff at the edge of the world, in the dark of tonight, the stars have wheeled a few degrees since we left him. The night is still young. He is watching the plains the way he watches every night. And if you could follow his eyes, you would see that the scattered lights down there are not scattered evenly. They cluster. They string themselves along rivers. They gather at the crossing places. There is a pattern in the fires now, and the pattern took shape over generations. And this chapter is the story of those generations, the years when fire stopped being a rescue and started being a workshop. It begins, of all places, in the ashes. Some woman, some morning, raking out a hearth that has burned all winter in one spot, finds the ground underneath changed. The dirt floor beneath the firebed has gone hard. Not dried mud, hard, 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 ringing under her knuckle, holding its shape against her scraping. A patch of floor turned to something halfway to stone. She kneels over it, and knocks on it again, and files the fact away, the way the practical people of the world have always filed such facts. Fire did this. Fire does something to clay. Now watch that one fact go to work. Watch her, or her daughter, or her daughter's daughter, shape a pot of river clay the way the family has always shaped them. The soft pots, the leather pots that slump in rain and melt back into the riverbank they came from. Watch her set this one, on a hunch, in the middle of the fire, instead of beside it. Watch her rake the coals up around its shoulders and keep them fed and hot through a day and a night, doing on purpose to the pot what years of hearth fires did by accident to the floor. And watch her draw it out of the cooling ashes, and knock on it. It rings. She knocks again. It answers again. A hard, bright note that no human ear has ever heard come out of clay. And she turns it in her hands. And it is light. And it is tough. And when she dips it full of water, the water stays. Hour after hour. Not one dark bead weeping through. The riverbank has been talked into becoming stone. And the negotiator was fire. Do not let the smallness of a pot fool you. Count what just happened. Water can be carried now, and kept, and boiled, which means food can be stewed soft for the toothless old and the toothless young, which means both ends of life just got longer. Grain can be stored dry through the wet months, sealed away from rot and rats, which means a good autumn can feed a bad spring for the first time in the history of the species. A family with fired jars is a family that can save, and saving, when you stand back far enough from it, is a way of sending food to people who do not exist yet. It is the first machine for reaching into the future. The pot on that woman's hearth is humble, and it is the first container tomorrow ever had. High above all of it, the Titan was still free. The choice that would end, that had already been made. He had made it holding a fennel stalk. The metal came next, and the metal came out of a complaint. The fires were hotter now. That was the potter's doing. A potter is a person professionally dissatisfied with her fire, always feeding it, walling it, coaxing the heat higher for a harder ring. And somewhere in those generations of coaxing, in some kiln built against a hillside, the fire got hot enough to argue with rock and a green-streaked stone in the kiln wall. The kind of stone the old man up the valley always swore would weep metal. Wept. Picture the finding of it in the cold ashes. A bead of something at the bottom of the burn. Stiff and bright, the size of a tear. It bends where stone would snap. It takes an edge where stone would crumble. It flashes in the sun like a piece of somewhere better. The men who turn it over in their palms have no word for copper yet, and no idea that they are holding the whole Bronze Age in miniature. The axes and the plowshares and the ship nails and the temple doors, all of it folded up inside. One tear of metal wept out of a hot stone. They just know the fire found something inside the rock that nobody knew was there, which was becoming the pattern. If anyone had stood back to see it, the fire was a key. It had unlocked the clay. And now the stone, the world, it turned out, was full of locked doors. And the creatures who had spent an age locked out in the dark now held the master key. And they went at the doors the way you would expect, hungrily, door after door. And the world kept opening. High above them, the Titan was still free. The mornings he had counted had not started arriving, but the count stood, and the fire began to travel. This is the quietest of the changes, and the one that redrew the earth. A family, watching the herds move north in spring toward the summer grass, does the thing no family could ever do before. It goes along. It packs the household, and it packs the hearth, an ember, bedded in ash, carried in a horn, or a shell, or a pot of the new hard clay, banked and breathed on at every rest stop, handed from mother to daughter across the day's walk, like the one household god that actually answers prayers. The old borders had never been drawn on any map. They were drawn in cold. This far north you may live, said the winter, and no farther. Now the border moved when the people moved. The valleys that killed the grandparents made room for the grandchildren, and the fires strung themselves up the rivers and through the passes and out across the high country. And from the cliff at the edge of the world the pattern of lights grew wider, year on year, decade on decade, like a slow bright stain, spreading across the black. He watched it spread. Sit with him a moment and watch it with him, because this is what he bought, appearing in front of him, installment by installment, and the bill for it had not even been presented yet. And inside the circles of all those traveling fires, the last change of these generations was happening, and it is the one that comes home to you, tonight, in your bed. The evenings had arrived. Remember the spare hour from the hut, the hour with nothing in it that had to be done. There were millions of those hours loose in the world now. Cooked food had shortened the eating. The light had lengthened the day. The fear had moved out past the tree line. And every human household on earth was left holding the one thing no creature before them had ever owned. Time that did not have to be spent surviving. They filled it the way we have filled it ever since. Somebody mended, and the mending got finer and turned into craft. Somebody hummed, and the humming found words. Somebody's hands, idle in the firelight, started shaping small things that had no use at all. A bird out of clay, beads out of shell, and the useless things were beautiful, and the beauty was the point. And somebody, some evening, with the family fed and the flames low and the faces gold around the circle, said the first version of the oldest sentence in the world. Listen, let me tell you a story, which is, in a way, where tonight began. The dark outside, the circle of warmth, the low voice going on and on, the listeners drifting toward sleep. You are lying inside the oldest room the species ever built. It was built around a stolen ember, and it has never once been torn down. The fire fed them, armed them, moved them, and bought them the evening. But a full stomach and a warm back are still not a future. A future needs one more thing. It needs somebody to look up. There is a shepherd lying on his back on a hillside, an hour past dusk, a long way from the village lights. The flock is folded for the night. The dog is asleep against his leg. He has an evening, one of the new evenings, and nothing to fill it with but the sky. So he watches the sky, night after night, season after season, the way a man watches anything he lives with. And somewhere in the watching, the thing happens that this chapter is about. He notices that the stars are not loose. They look loose. They look like sparks scattered across the black, spilled once and lying where they fell. But he has been watching too long now to be fooled. The sparks keep formation. The same shapes come up over the same ridge, in the same order, night after night. The hunter with his belt, the ladle, the little knot of sisters, each one rising on schedule, like flocks coming over a hill, in an order the shepherd knows by heart. The whole sky, he realizes, lying there with his heart going strangely fast, is turning slowly, all of one piece, like an enormous wheel, and the wheel keeps time. The shapes of early summer are not the shapes of harvest. The sky sowing month comes back every year, the same stars over the same ridge, and it has never once been late. Hold what that means. The world down here is a liar. Warm spells lie in winter. Cold snaps lie in spring. Rain promises and does not come. Every mortal generation had been guessing, and paying for its guesses in dead seed and hungry months. And the whole time, hanging over their heads every clear night of their lives, there was a calendar that cannot lie, wound and running since the beginning of things, keeping perfect time for nobody. The old drama gives this away in one line that can still stop your breath if you are not braced for it. In the play, the chained Titan reckons up what he did for human beings, charge by charge, like a man reading his own indictment. And one of the charges is this: they looked at the stars, he says, but they did not know how to read them. I showed them the risings and the settings. I showed them that the sky was a book. Feel the size of that gift next to the size of the fire. The fire was warmth for tonight. This was the shape of the whole year, handed over at once. The farmer who knows which stars rise at sowing time is a farmer who plants on the sky's word instead of the weather's lie. And his seed goes into ground that will not freeze it. And his harvest is not a hope anymore. It is an appointment. And the sailor, give the sailor his scene, because his is the bravest use anybody ever found for a star. There is a boat, one of the first boats, out past the sight of land at night, which is the loneliest place the species had ever yet been. Black water below, black air above, no edge, no landmark, nothing anywhere with a name on it, except up. The sailor has one star, the low bright one that does not wander with its fellows, the one that hangs in the same quarter of the sky all night, every night, faithful as a nail in a wall. He sets his shoulder to it and holds his course by it, hour after hour across the black, and the star walks him home. Men were crossing open water on starlight, on the word of a point of fire a universe away, and making landfall where they meant to. The sky had become a road. Numbers came into the world about the same way, through a different door, and the door was loss. A herdsman in the old days knew his flock the way you know faces. That one, the lame one, the black one, and faces work, right up until the flock grows past the reach of knowing. And then the evenings turn uneasy, because something can be missing, and the missing has no name. Count that feeling. It is a specific dread, the dread of a hole you cannot see. So the herdsman starts keeping pebbles in a pouch, one pebble to one animal. And at dusk he runs the flock through the gate and moves a pebble for each body through. And some evening there is a pebble left over in his palm. And there it is, the missing, made visible, a small stone sitting in a hand, saying, "One is gone. Go and look." He is holding the absence of a sheep. That is all a number is. And it was one of the mightiest things anyone ever taught anybody. The harvest could be counted now, and the seed corn, and the days to the frost. The future had quantities in it. You could plan against a numbered future. And they did. And we do. But writing is the one I would keep, if I could keep only one. And I want to build you the scene, the way the bones of the old sources let us build it. There is an old man, a maker of marks. It hardly matters what the marks began as: tallies pressed in wet clay, ownership signs, pictures worn down to strokes. He is old, and his son trades up the coast, months gone at a time. And this year the old man is sick in a way he recognizes. So he takes up a soft clay tablet, and with a reed he presses in the marks, slowly, getting them right. Which field lies fallow next year? Which neighbor holds the debt? And how much? Where the good seed is jarred and sealed. What is owed, and to whom? The whole quiet ledger of a small life, pressed line by line into the clay. And he dries the tablet by the fire that hardens clay, the stolen fire, doing its quietest work. Understand what this man has figured out, because he is the first one in this story to beat the oldest enemy in it. Every word ever spoken before this had one life. It lived in the air a moment, went into whatever ears were near, and died. Memory carried what it could and dropped what it couldn't. And 3 generations was about the far edge of any voice's reach. The old man knows this. He has watched everyone he loved go silent, one after another, all his life. And he presses the reed into the clay anyway, because he has understood the trick of it. The tablet is not a record. The tablet is his voice, banked like an ember, waiting. His son will come home in the spring, months after the burial, and sit down with the tablet. And there, one line at a time, his father will speak to him, instruction by instruction, in order, from the far side of the grave, patient, exact, unhurried, everything the winter would have stolen, delivered, whole, the dead man's forethought, outliving him, working for his family after him. The species had learned to bank a voice, and the poets of that country, when they finally rose, would be right to put this gift in the same breath as the fire, because it is the same gift, heat, banked in a stalk, carried across a mountain, a mind, banked in clay, carried across death, one thief. Both times there were more arts. The old drama names them steadily, like tools coming off a rack, the yoke, so that the ox's strength became the field's, the healing craft, and give that one its half seen at least, because it began the day somebody sat down next to a fever instead of walking away from it, and watched it, days running, and saw that the fever kept hours, rose at evening, broke at the turning points, ran a course. Illness had always been a demon, and demons are beyond you. A course is not beyond you. A thing with a shape can be learned, and a thing that can be learned can be fought. Medicine is just forethought, kneeling at a bedside, ships whole, sails and all. The play says, the buried wealth of the earth, the bronze and iron and silver in their seams, steadily, yift on yift, the whole toolkit of a people who could now feed themselves, count themselves, sail home, save their voices, and fight their fevers, and every one of those arts, run it back and look, is the same single art, wearing different clothes. Reading the sky is seeing the winter before it comes. Numbering the flock is seeing the loss before it starves you. Writing is speaking to a time you will not live in. Medicine is knowing where the fever goes before it goes there. He did not hand them a pile of separate inventions. He taught them, art by art. The one thing he took forethought, the loneliest gift in creation, the gift that had cost him every comfortable hour of his long existence, and he broke it into pieces small enough for mortal hands. Now remember where he is lying tonight. He is lying under that exact sky, pinned to the rock at the edge of the world, with the whole turning book of the stars wheeling over him in its given order, all night, every night. The risings and the settings he taught the species to read, keeping their perfect faithful time over a prisoner who cannot look away from them. Zeus took his freedom, his comfort, and his company. Nobody ever managed to take down the stars. The calendar he gave away hangs over his sentence. And whether that sky kept him company through the long ages, or measured them out one cold degree at a time, the old accounts do not say, and I will not guess. Both is my suspicion. Most true things on this mountain are both. They could build now, count now, sile, heal, save, and write. The kindling had caught, and the fire of it was spreading up through every art at once, and you would think the work was finished. One thing was left. No art could touch it. They knew, every one of them, from the first fireside on, that they were going to die, and what he did about that is the strangest gift in the whole story. The old drama keeps a strange order of events, and the strangeness is the doorway into this chapter. So, walk through it with me. When the chained Titan reads out the list of what he did for humanity, the fire is not the first item. You would expect it first. It is the famous one, the one on the pottery, the one in the name of every retelling. But in the play, before the fire, before the arts, he names something else, and the chorus asks him what he means, and his answer has been sitting in that text for 2,500 years, getting stranger every time anyone reads it slowly. I stopped mortals from seeing their death ahead of them, he says, and the chorus asks, what cure did you find for that sickness? And he says, I planted blind hopes in them. Blind hopes, that is the phrase, as close as English will carry it. Not proud words, not glory, blind hopes, planted. The way you plant something you want to outlive you, and the play moves on, and the fire comes next, and no explanation is ever given. And tonight we are going to stop where the play did not, because look at who is speaking. This is forethought. Seeing ahead is not his tool. It is his substance, and it has cost him what you have watched it cost him all night. The council that laughed, the loneliness one moved past everyone he loved, the walk downhill with the whole bill already totaled. He is the single being in creation who knows exactly, precisely, to the ounce, what a clear view of the future weighs. And these creatures had one. That was the flaw in them. The crack running through everything. Not the missing claws. Not the thin skin. The mound of earth with the flat stone on it. Alone among the animals. They saw where the road went. The wolf does not know it will die. And hunts. The bird does not know. And builds. These knew. Every plan they might make. The knowing sat across the end of it, like a wall across a road. And a creature that sees the wall clearly enough will stop walking. Why plant, when you may not stand in the harvest? Why build past your own need? Why begin anything that finishes after you do? Perfect foresight in a mortal creature does not produce wisdom. It produces stillness. He could read that consequence the way he read everything, running out ahead of them, the whole species sitting down quietly in the road. So the being made of foresight reached into them and turned their foresight partly blind, softened it, blurred the wall, left them the knowledge that death comes, but took away the sight of the day and the hour, and into the blurred place where the clear view had been, he planted something that does not calculate. I am not going to try to say what hope is. The play does not, and 3,000 years of argument since has not settled it, and the night is too old for me to start. What I can do is show you what it looks like when it is working. It looks like 4 ordinary scenes, and you have stood inside all 4. A man on a dry hillside in the spring, punching holes in the dust with a stick, dropping a seed in each hole. The sky has not promised him anything. The rains failed 2 years out of the last 5, and he was there for both. And he can smell this year's dryness on the wind, as well as you can smell rain coming. He has no evidence. He plants the whole field. A crew on a beach, building a boat for a crossing none of them has made, to a shore none of them has seen. They caulk her seams like men who intend to arrive. Every plank is an argument with the horizon, and the horizon has said nothing back. And they keep planking. A woman sewing small clothes in the winter firelight, for a child that is coming in the spring. The winters are hard in her valley, and she knows what they take. Her hands do not slow down. Stitch after stitch after stitch. Each one a small flag planted in a season she cannot see and does not control, claiming it. And an old man on a stony slope, setting out olive trees, whips of green no thicker than his thumb. An olive comes into its full bearing in 40 years, and he is past 60, and he knows both numbers, and kneels there anyway, firming the soil with his bad hands, watering in each little tree, like a promise being kept to somebody who has not arrived yet. Ask him who the olives are for, and he will straighten up and look at you, and not understand the question. That is blind hope. It is not the belief that things will go well. The planter has no such belief. You watched his face. It is the thing underneath belief, older and dumber and far stronger, the thing that keeps the hands moving on the future's behalf without demanding to see the future's terms. It does not argue with the wall at the end of the road. It just declines, quietly, every single morning, to look at it, and on that daily refusal, run it back through the night behind us. Everything else was built. The saved seed is hope in a jar. The letter in the clay is hope with a voice. The star charted. The flock counted. The fever watched. Every art he gave them only works in the hands of a creature that has already decided tomorrow is worth working for. The arts were the tools. This was the grip. And you are lying inside this gift too. Right now. Tonight. There is a calendar hanging somewhere in your house with appointments written in months you have not reached. Seeds in a drawer in the garage. Something you are saving for. Something you are planning. Somebody's date circled in the spring. Every one of those is a small blind flag planted out ahead of you in the dark. And you planted them the way the old man planted olives, without terms, without guarantees. Because you are his kind of creature, and that is what his kind of creature does. The species has never once stopped doing it. Not through plague years, not through the burning of its cities, not through anything the long story since has thrown at it. The hands keep moving. So set the two great gifts side by side, and see the design of the whole thing at last. He gave them tomorrow twice. Once, by hiding the end of it, so that they could bear to look down the road, and once by handing them the fire, so they would have something to build there. Zeus watched all of this from the high air, watched the lights spread up the valleys year on year, watched the boats go out and come back on the word of a star, watched a species that had been huddled kindling in the rain stand up and stretch and start laying its plans. On land, he ruled, by the light of a fire stolen out of his own mountain, and the king did nothing, month after month, and the doing of nothing was not peace. You have met this king, whichever version of him you carried out of Mecone, angry or patient. Neither version forgets, and the patient one was composing. The fire could not be taken back. 10,000 hearths deep, banked in horns and pots and fennel stalks across the whole face of the earth. The ember was past any recall, and a king does not repeat a move that failed. So the answer, when it came, would not come for the fire. He began instead to build it. The answer, in the same workshop the ember was stolen from, at the same forge, by the same craftsman's hands, and the answer had a face. The order came down to the workshop the way orders came down in the new sky, quietly, completely, with no explanations attached, and the craftsman god stood at his forge and read it twice, because in all the ages of making things, nobody had ever asked him for this. Make a person stand in that workshop while he takes the measure of the job, because we have been here before, you and I. This is the same cavern of orange light on the flank of Olympus, the same banked fires, the same racks of hammers. This is the room the ember was stolen from. Whether the king chose it for that reason, no account says, and no account needed to. There is a kind of mind that answers a theft from a room by commissioning the counterstroke in the same room, and you have already met the mind. The craftsman was Hephaestus, the lame god, the one true maker among the immortals, and I want you to know what his hands could do before you watch what they did. The poets say he built serving women out of gold, golden girls who moved and helped him at his work and had understanding in their hearts. He built tables that rolled themselves to the feasts and home again. He built the gates of heaven and the armor of gods. And everything he touched came out, finished, in a way that made the other immortals feel, briefly, or he was the best pair of hands in the universe, and he had been robbed by his own friend. And now the king was asking those hands for a masterpiece. The materials were the strangest part of the commission. No gold this time, no bronze, no ivory, none of the deathless stuffs of heaven, earth and water, clay. He was ordered to work in clay, the mortal medium, the stuff of riverbanks and potyards, the stuff the later tellers would swear the first humans themselves were shaped from. Whatever the king intended by that choice, the craftsman would have understood it with his hands the moment he sank them into the wet clay. This thing being made was going to pass. It was going to walk into the mortal world, wearing the mortal world, indistinguishable. One of them, so he shaped her, in the likeness of the immortal goddesses. The old poet says, a girl's form, lovely, and he did it the way he did everything, past all improving, and when the shaping was done, the workshop began to fill with visitors, because this commission had a distribution list, and here is where the making becomes an assembly, and you should watch it station by station, the way you watched a Titan sort an ox. Athena came first, grey-eyed, and brought the work of her own hands. She dressed the girl in silvery cloth of her own weaving, and set a veil on her, worked with wonders, and crowned her, and then gave a gift that went deeper than the cloth. She taught the clay hands their craft, the loom, the needle, the whole art of making, so that the girl would come into the world already skilled. already useful, already easy to want in a house. Aphrodite leaned over her and gave what Aphrodite gives. Grace, the old poet says, poured over her head, and longing that unstrings the limbs, meaning not that she would love, but that she would be loved, helplessly, on sight, by whoever stood in front of her. It was aimed. That gift, everything on this table was aimed. And then Hermes, Mark Hermes, the messenger, the god of persuasion and crossings and deals too good to check, because his contribution is the one the poet lingers on with something cold in his voice. Into her breast he set a shameless mind and a double-dealing nature, lies and winning words, a voice that could carry anything. The outside of her was Athena's and Aphrodite's. The inside was his. More came. The graces hung gold about her. The seasons wove spring flowers into her crown. Persuasion herself attended. Every power in the sky set one gift into the work. Station after station, hand after hand, until at last she was finished, and they named her for the making itself. Pandora, the all-gifted, the one to whom everyone gave. Now stop, and stand still, and look at her, because the story almost never does. And tonight we will. At some moment in that bright workshop, this being opened her eyes for the first time. And here is what was true in that moment. And I want it said plainly, because the old accounts will not say it, and the silence has lasted long enough. She opened her eyes already finished, already beautiful, already skilled, already sweet-voiced, already carrying, folded into her breast by a god's hands before she ever drew breath. Purposes she had not chosen and was never told. Nobody asked her anything. Nobody warned her of anything. She was the most carefully designed thing the universe had ever produced, and not one line of the design was hers. And she stood up out of the workshop into her single day of heaven, not knowing, and I will say this once, and you can carry it the rest of the night. No teller anywhere, in any version, in any age, says she knew what she was. They gave her a dowry. It was a jar, a great clay jar, the kind that stood shoulder high in every storeroom in that world, the kind the harvest went into, the kind that fed the winter and the spring. Your books called it a box, and the box is a mistake, a translation slip made 2,000 years after the story was first told, by a scholar working fast, and it stuck the way errors stick. But the old word is the jar, the storage jar, the vessel of keeping, and the difference matters more than it seems. A box is furniture. A jar is a promise. A jar standing in a house means somebody saved, somebody planned, somebody put something by for the people of that house to open when the lean months came. A jar is where the future is kept. Whoever chose that vessel for this cargo understood the species it was addressed to all the way down. What was in it? She was not told. What she was told was one thing only: do not open it. And then Hermes took her by the hand, the messenger, the god of deliveries, and led her down the mountain, down the same dark slopes. A thief had walked in the other direction, carrying a fennel stalk, down past the tree line, down onto the plains among the fires, to one particular door. And the door belonged to Prometheus, because Forethought had seen this coming too. Of course he had. You know him now, before any of it, before the cliff, before the chains. He had gone to his brother and left an instruction, and the old poet preserves it word for word, the way you preserve the one sentence that everything afterward turned on. If Zeus sends you a gift, do not take it. Send it back, for fear it prove some harm to mortal men. One rule: clear as a rule can be made, from the one mind in creation that could read the sender, and the man he left it with was the man whose name means afterthought. The knock came in the morning, and Prometheus opened his door, and this chapter is going to stand on that threshold a while, longer than you expect, because the jar can wait and the man cannot. Every telling in 3,000 years has hurried past him to get to the lid coming off, and the hurrying has been unfair. And tonight we do not hurry. Look at him in his doorway. Be fair to him. He is not a fool. Put that down first and keep it down. He is the brother who lived entirely in the present tense. And the present tense is not a small country. He saw whatever stood in front of him with a clarity his great brother never managed, because his great brother looked at everything and saw its consequences. And consequences are a kind of veil too. Show forethought a spring morning, and he saw the winter folded up inside it. Show Prometheus the same morning, and he saw the morning. All of it. The light, the smell of the wet ground, the particular blue. People loved him. We said it before the war, and it stayed true after, because being seen in the present tense, completely, with nothing subtracted for what you might cost later, is the rarest thing anyone ever gives anyone. That is who opened the door. And what stood on the doorstep was the present tense, perfected, the most complete, right now ever assembled, station by station, by every artist in heaven. Grace poured over her head, longing that unstrings the limbs, a voice with winning words set into it by the god of persuasion himself, and spring flowers in her crown, and her eyes on his. The warning was in him. Understand that, because it is the exact cruelty of the design. His brother's rule was not forgotten, not erased. It lay in him where morning rules lie by evening, deep under the day, the way a thing you were told at breakfast lies somewhere beneath the astonishment of noon. If Zeus sends you a gift, it was there. It was filed, and the sender had accounted for the filing, because the sender had chosen for his messenger the one shape in all creation guaranteed to fill the present tense of this particular man to the brim, past the brim, until there was no room in the moment for any earlier sentence to surface. He remembered the rule. The accounts agree that he remembered it. Afterward, that is the whole biography of Prometheus, in one word, and it is why his name means what it means. And I am not going to laugh at him, tonight or ever. She was through the door, and the door was shut, and the house was warm with her. And somewhere in the settling of that warmth, the rule rose up in him at last. Late, complete, useless, the way the flood rises in the night after the herds were left in the low pasture. If Zeus sends you a gift, send it back. He stood in his own house, hearing it in his brother's voice. And his brother was right, and being right had arrived, as it always arrives in this family. After, now the jar. And here I owe you honesty about what the record holds, because this is one of those places where the story everyone knows is smoother than the story that was written down. How long it stood in that house, no one says. Days, seasons, years. The oldest account does not care. Whether she opened it out of the curiosity the whole world has accused her of ever since, or whether the shameless mind set in her breast by Hermes was simply doing, at last, the one thing it was installed to do, or whether it was nothing so designed, whether it was only that every jar in every house on earth is eventually opened, because jars are for opening, because keeping and opening are the same art in two tenses. The poet does not say, he gives us the lid coming off in half a line. No reason attached, and every reason you have ever heard was added later by tellers who could not bear the silence. We can bear it. The lid came off. That is what is known, and what was in the jar came out into the world. I am not going to read you a catalogue of sorrows. The old poet himself barely does. And the ones he names have lost their edges over the centuries anyway. What came out is better understood by what changed. In the houses, in the days, in the way the species held its own life. So feel the changes. The way the family in the hut once felt the fire. Sickness changed. There had always been sickness, but it had walked up to people in the open. Slow, visible, a thing that announced itself. Now it travelled ahead of its own symptoms. Now it moved through a town silently. By night, the poet says the sorrows go about in silence, because the king in his design gave them no voices, and a man could carry his ending inside him for a season and feel nothing. And the first knock was already too late. The body became a house with an unwatchable door. Work changed. The ground that had given its harvest grudgingly enough now fought for every furrow. Labor grew teeth. The day's bread began to cost the whole day. And then, some of the night. And the species learned tiredness of a new depth. The kind that gets into the bones and stays. The kind you know. And worry came. Of all the cargo, this was the finest aimed. And I want you to see the aim, because you have spent this night learning how this king works. Run it back. The first gift of forethought. The strange one. The one before the fire. He had softened their sight of death. He had blurred the wall at the end of the road so the hands could keep moving. And into the blur he had planted blind hope. That was the foundation everything else stood on. The jar was the answer to the foundation. What it loosed into the blur was fear. Fear of the very things that could no longer be seen. Sickness with no voice. Ruin with no schedule. Endings with no date. Prometheus had hidden the day of their death from them. And Zeus put the dread of it back. And the dread was worse than the knowledge had been. Because knowledge, at least, stands still. The species would live now the way you have lived on your worst nights. Awake in the dark. Listening for something it could not name. The design does not miss. Aimed at the softened place. Through the one door in the world that a warning was already posted on. Carried by a bearer, built so that the warning would surface late. You would almost admire it. Say that sentence one more time tonight. And mean it less than ever. But she caught the lid. Here is the detail the whole world remembers. The one thing about this woman everyone can tell you, besides the blame. Before the last of the cargo could rise out of the jar, the lid came down again. Hers, or fate's, or heaven's. The poet says the will of Zeus was in it and lets the ambiguity stand. And one passenger was still inside, under the very lip of the jar. The poet says, in the mouth of it, not out, elpis, hope. And for nearly 3,000 years, readers have stood around that jar, arguing about what it means that hope stayed in it. And the argument has two honest sides. And you are going to hear both in 3 sentences, and then we are going to walk on. Exactly as I promised you at the start of the night. If the jar was a prison, then hope was withheld from us, kept back, the one mercy locked away while every sorrow ran free. If the jar was a pantry, the vessel of keeping, the place a house, stores what it lives on, then hope was preserved for us, saved through the disaster, held safe under the lid where the sorrows could not get at it, ours to draw on. Both readings have been sitting in the same jar since the poem was first sung, and I am going to leave the lid where it is. What I can tell you is what the species did next, because that part is not ambiguous, and it is the finding of this whole chapter. Nobody gave the fire back. The world after the jar was harder than the world before it. Grant all of it. The silent sicknesses, the toothed labor, the dread, and the fires stayed lit. Everyone. The planter went back out onto his dry hillside the next spring, and the spring after the fever year, and the spring after the burying year, punching holes in the dust. No evidence. Whole field. The boats kept going out past the sight of land. The women kept sewing small clothes in the winter light. Blind hope. It turned out, was jar-proof. It had been planted deeper than the sorrows could reach, by hands that knew exactly how deep the sorrows would dig, and the King of the Sky stood over his finished, perfect, delivered design, and watched the lights on the plains not go out, and understood that he had lost again. He stopped aiming at their houses after that. He aimed at the weather. The rain began the way every rain begins, and for one day nobody thought anything of it. Farmers looked up, and were mostly glad. The cisterns had been low. Rain is a gift in that dry country, and the first evening of it, you could have stood in any doorway on the plains and heard the same easy talk. Good soaking. The ground needed it. It will pass by morning. It did not pass by morning. It did not pass at all. The second day it came harder. Straight down. Heavy. And the talk in the doorways got shorter. The third day, the rivers put their shoulders up over their banks. Brown and loud. And the low fields went under. And the talk stopped. There is a moment in weather, and everyone who has lived through the bad kind knows it. When it stops being weather, when the sky settles into its work with a steadiness that has intention in it, and some animal part of you, older than language, sits up and says, "This is not weather. This is aimed." The people of the plains reached that moment on the fourth day, or the fifth, watching grey water braid across fields that had never flooded in the memory of anyone's grandmother. They were right. It was aimed. The king had made his decision in the high air, and this time there was no craftsmanship in it, no assembly, no beautiful messenger with a designed heart. He had tried taking the fire, and the fire came back. He had tried the jar, and the species had absorbed everything in it and gone on planting. So the third answer was the oldest answer power owns. Enough. Wash it. Clear the board. Let the water take the whole experiment. And let the world go back to being quiet. And it would have gone exactly that way. Except for one thing. And the one thing is the whole reason this chapter is in the story. Forethought had a son. His name was Deucalion. And the later tellers, who preserve this part, say he was a king among men in those days. A good one. Grown and grey himself by now. And mark who he was on both sides of his blood, because we have arrived at the place where the two brothers' lines run together, and no ancient hand ever stopped to point at what I am about to point at. Deucalion was the son of Prometheus, and his wife, Pyrrha, whom he loved, was the daughter of Epimetheus and Pandora, the son of Forethought, married to the daughter of Afterthought and the woman from the workshop, both brothers of the old rock, both sides of the whole long story, folded into one marriage, one household, standing in the rain. The warning came the way you would expect it to come, from the father to the son. The old accounts give it in one line. Prometheus told Deucalion what was coming, and told him what to build. Archest, and I want to be accurate here, because your mind has already reached for the wrong picture. Not a ship, not the great ark of that other flood story, the one from the lands further east, with its decks and its animals 2 by 2. The Greek version is smaller and stranger and closer to the bone. The word the old tellers use means a box. Archest, the kind of stout wooden chest a household keeps its stores in. A larnax. Deucalion built a large one, provisioned it, caulked it, And when the rivers came for the house, he and Pyrrha climbed into it, 2 people in a wooden box, and the water lifted them off the earth. 9 days. The accounts say, 9 days and 9 nights on the face of a drowned world. I will not stage the drowning for you at length, because you are going towards sleep and I keep my agreements. But the shape of it belongs to the story. So take it in 3 strokes. The water came up over the thresholds first, and put out every hearth it entered. Honor by on, the whole map of lights we have watched spread across the plains all night, going dark valley by valley, the great slow bright stain of the species pulling back to black. It came up over the storerooms, over the jars, over the saved seed and the sealed grain, all the banked tomorrows of 1,000 villages, and carried them off rolling in the brown dark. And it came up over the roofs and the high ground, and then there was no more up, and the world was one grey water from edge to edge, with a wooden box riding on it, small as a fennel stalk on a mountainside, carrying everything that was left. Inside the box, 2 old people held each other in the dark and listened. Then the rain stopped. The accounts spend no time on the stopping, and neither did the king. I suspect the point had been made. The waters stood a while, then began to draw down, and on the 9th day the chest grounded. With a shudder they must have felt in their spines. On high rock, the peak of Parnassus, the old tellers say, the great mountain above, what would one day be Delphi, the navel of the world. The lid came up, 2 faces looked out, and this is the part of the flood story that belongs to this night, the part no other flood story has. What they saw, and what they did about it. They saw nothing. That is what they saw. Mud, and standing water going off grey to every horizon, and silence of a kind that had not existed since before the first fire, because there was no one left to make a sound, no smoke anywhere, no dog barking at any distance. The species that had learned to fill the evenings was down to 2, and the 2 were old, past the age of beginning again in the ordinary way, and they knew it, and they stood on the rock in the mud knowing it. Here is what they did. They prayed, and the answer that came back is one of the strangest and most beautiful sentences in all the old stories. Cover your heads, the oracle said, and throw the bones of your mother behind you. Pyrrha wept. The tellers say she would not do it, whatever it meant. It sounded like sacrilege, digging up the dead, scattering a parent, and she had lost enough. And Deucalion stood on the empty rock turning the sentence over. And I want you to watch him do it, because watch whose son he is. He did not take the words at their face. He looked at the words the way his father looked at rivers, for what stood behind them, for the thing folded up inside, the bones of our mother. Our mother, what is the mother of all of us? Of every mortal thing. The earth. The earth is the mother, and the bones of the earth are the stones. So they did the thing the sentence actually said. 2 old people, alone on a mountain over a drowned world, covered their heads and picked up stones from the mud and walked forward, and threw the stones behind them, over their shoulders, not looking back, stone after stone after stone, and behind them, where the stones fell, the stones softened. The old tellers describe it with wonder they do not even try to hide. Each stone lost its hardness, and swelled, and began to take shape, the way clay takes shape under a slow, invisible hand. Rough figures at first, blurred, like statues half finished in a workshop, and then less rough, and then finished, and then breathing. The stones Deucalion threw stood up as men. The stones Pyrrha threw stood up as women. a new people, rising out of the mud of the old world's grave, born from rock. And the Greeks looked at themselves ever afterward and said, "That is why we are a hard people. That is why we last. We are the children of stone, and stone endures. Stand back from this one moment before we leave it, because the pieces on this mountaintop have never once been added up out loud, and they deserve it." The new human race was seeded by the son of Prometheus and the daughter of Epimetheus and Pandora. Run the bloodlines through Deucalion. Every generation after carries forethought, the planner, the firebringer, the one who reads the river through Pyrrha. Every generation carries afterthought, who love the present tense, and Pandora, the all-gifted, workshop and jar and all, the gift and the flaw, the planning and the late remembering, the fire and the sorrows, braided into one bloodline on one rock in the mud, and never separated again. You have felt both strands pulling in you your whole life. Now you know the wedding they came from. Twice now. Count it, because the king in the high air was certainly counting. Once with an ember, once with a warning. Twice, this one Titan had reached down and pulled the whole human line back from the edge of ending. The flood had been answered before it fell. The rescue was his son, even drowned. The world came back up out of the water, carrying his blood in it. The water was gone, and the fires came back, hearth by hearth, up the drying valleys, and the king watched the lights return, and the order finally came down from the high air, bring him to the edge of the world. It is deep night on the mountain now, our mountain, the real one. Tonight's past the middle of the dark. The stars have wheeled a long way since dusk, and the cold off the gorge has found its bottom, and he hangs in it the way he has hung in it all night, breathing slow, and the memory the night has been circling all this time is the one it circles last, because it is the one where the past catches up to the present, and they become the same place. The day they brought him here, there was no trial. Say that first, because you might have assumed one. Some assembly of the sky, some reading of charges, nothing in the old accounts. There is only the order, and the escort, and the mountain, and when the old drama opens, the sentence is already mid-execution. Justice in the new sky was not a proceeding. It was a delivery. The escort came for him, and the escort was two. And I want you to hear their names, because their names are the whole politics of the moment. The king did not send soldiers. He sent Kratos and Bia, and those are not names the way Hermes is a name. Kratos is the Greek word for power. Bia is the Greek word for force. Violence, the strength that compels. The king reached for the two facts that had won him the universe and gave the facts legs and sent them. And when a ruler needs power and force to walk a prisoner to the wall, he sends them as persons. The old dramatist put Kratos on stage speaking, hard, flat, impatient, a voice with no interior to it at all. Bia, he wrote, as present and silent. In the whole play, force never says one word. Force does not need any. And there was a third figure in the escort, walking behind the two of them, slower, because he was lame, and carrying his tools. They made Hephaestus do it. Sit up inside yourself one last time tonight, because of everything the king designed, and you have watched him design all night. This is the design I cannot get past. The craftsman god, the maker, the friend, the owner of the forge the ember came out of, the one being on Olympus with a genuine grievance against the prisoner, and the king ordered him personally, to drive the chains, and it was not for the grievance. Understand that. It was because the chains had to hold a titan against a mountain until the end of time, and only one pair of hands in the universe could make fastenings like that. And both of those hands belonged to the thief's best friend in the sky. The old drama opens on exactly this scene, the first thing the audience ever sees, and it preserves what the craftsman said. Standing at the foot of the cliff with the shackles in his hands, he said he did not have the heart for it. He said, to the prisoner, in front of power and force, that he was of the prisoner's own kind, his kin, and that this work was hateful to him. He stalled. He grieved out loud, and power turned on him with the sentence that has been handed down every chain of command since the beginning of the world. Why delay? Why pity this one? He is the enemy of the gods now. Your sympathy is a luxury the king has not authorized. And the craftsman did the work. That is the terrible center of the scene, and the reason it has lasted. Not that he refused, that he did not. He hated it, said so, meant it, and drove the pins anyway, because the alternative was joining the prisoner. And he knew this king. So do you. By now, every age since has staged its own version of that little scene. The decent man with the tools, the flat voice behind him, quoting orders, and the work getting done. The oldest playwright in the Western canon put it first, on page 1, before anything else in the drama, as if to say, before we speak of titans and kings, watch this. This is how it actually happens. Now the work itself, and here I am going to keep a promise I made you at the start of the night. You will get no wounds from me, no torn anything, no cries. The scene does not need them, and the old accounts barely use them. What the scene runs on is sound. So close your eyes the rest of the way and listen with the prisoner, because that is how he took most of it, facing the rock, cheek against the cold grey stone of the cliff you have known since dusk. Listen, the ring of a hammer on a bronze wedge, driving an anchor into living rock. It goes out flat across the gorge, hits the far wall, and comes back a half-beat late, doubled, so that every blow strikes twice, once in the arm and once in the echo. Again, again. The craftsman works the way masters work, without hurry, without waste, each blow landing exactly where the last one ended. And the rhythm of it is the worst part, because the rhythm is care. He is doing this well. He cannot help doing it well. Fastenings meant to hold forever, set by a friend who is weeping. The drama says he wept, and the hammer never once loses the beat. The drag of chain across stone, heavy, link over link, the bite of the wedges going home, wind, under everything, the wind of this mountain that you have listened to all night, which was listener, then too, and at some point, a pause, and the voice of power one more time, prodding, is he secured? Strike again, harder. Pin the arms. This one is clever. Leave nothing loose. And the hammer answering, and under all of it, if the wind dropped, the breathing of the prisoner against the rock, steady, unhurried, the breathing of someone who is somewhere else. Because here is the thing about the prisoner, the thing that power could not see and the craftsman could not bear. Through the entire scene, all the driving and ringing and grieving, every account agrees. He said nothing, not one word. The being whose voice had counseled the council, advised the king, taught the species, the most articulate mind in the universe, stood against the rock through the whole of his own chaining in total silence. The old dramatist understood exactly what he had in that silence, and held it, scene after scene, until power and force and the weeping craftsman had all gone back down the mountain. until the footsteps died off the rock, until the prisoner was alone with the wind for the first time, and only then, to the empty air, to the sky and the sea and the earth. No audience left but the elements. The play gives him his first line, and after everything you have heard tonight, I think you understand it. What was there to say to them? He had seen this cliff from the far side of a fennel stalk, ages ago. For everyone else on that mountain, something shocking was happening. For him, an old appointment was being kept. You do not argue with a delivery. He had read the contract before he signed it, walking downhill in the dark with a warm stalk in his hand. And the silence was the signature holding. Power got the last word. Of course, power always takes it, turning to go, looking up at the finished work. The old drama gives him a taunt to leave behind, and the taunt was the prisoner's own name, thrown like a stone. Forethought, they call you. He gestured at the chains. Let us see Forethought get you out of these. And then the boots on the rock, fading, and then nothing. Wind. The hammer blows, stopped echoing after a while. Everything stops echoing after a while. He hung in the new silence and watched the light go down over the edge of the world. The first of all, the Dusks, and the stars came up in their given order, the ones he taught the species to read, keeping perfect time. And he began the weight he had already seen, down to the color of the rock, down to the count of the mornings. The next morning, at first light, a speck came up out of the sunrise. You already know the schedule. He knew it before there was a schedule. What you do not know yet, what nobody on that mountain knew but him, is how long a schedule can run, and what can walk up to it. One ordinary evening, on 2 human feet, and stop it. Now I am going to do something with time, and you do not have to follow it. You just have to float on it. This is the slowest stretch of the night, and it is built that way on purpose, because the years we are crossing now were built that way too. Start with snow. It fell on him that first winter, and it melted off the rock in spring, and that was 1. It fell again, and melted again, and that was 2. Let the count run. 10, 100. The snows come up the gorge in grey curtains and pull back. Come and pull back, like a tide, with a year for a heartbeat. And after enough of them, even the counting stops mattering, and there is only the rhythm. White, then bare rock, then white. His hair whitens with frost and darkens with thaw. The chains ice over and weep and dry. 1,000. The mountain itself moved. Given enough of those years, ice came down out of the high valleys in ages, when the world cooled. Rivers of it, patient past anything alive, grinding the gorges deeper by a hand's width in a century. And then the world warmed, and the ice drew up again, like a thing exhaling. Springs found new cracks in the cliff and left mineral stains down the grey rock like slow, pale banners. Even the stars drifted. That is real. And it takes tens of thousands of years to see. And he had them. The wheel of the sky he taught the species to read kept its perfect daily time. And underneath the daily time, over ages, the whole wheel slid, the way a clock's face might slowly turn beneath its own hands, constellations easing out of their stations, the pole itself wandering among new stars. He is the only being in this story who watched the sky change its mind. He noticed everything. Noticing was the sentence. And the eagle came, and came, and came, until the coming stopped being an event and became a climate. I told you, at the start of the night, I would spend no more words on it. And I am keeping that bargain. It was the morning. That is all it was now. The way winter is not an attack, just the shape of the season. The bird was the shape of the day, and the healing was the shape of the dark. And between them, the years went by, the way water goes by a fixed stone. Visitors came, early on, twice, and never again, and both visits are preserved in the old drama. So we will keep them. The first were the daughters of ocean, sea nymphs, dozens of them, who heard the hammering across the world. The play says, heard the ring of bronze all the way down in their father's halls, and came up through the air on winged sandals to see. They found the counselor of heaven nailed to a cliff, and they wept for him, and they stayed a while, gentle, horrified, useless, the way the kind so often are in the presence of the unfixable. They asked him how it happened, and he told them everything you have heard tonight, which is how the old dramatist got the story into his play, and how, in a sense, it reached you. And then their father came, Ocean himself, the old titan of the encircling sea, riding up the wind on a four-legged bird. And Ocean came with advice. Hear the advice fairly, because the play does, and because you have known people who gave it, and some nights you have been the one giving it. Yield, old friend. That was the whole of it, dressed in many words. The king is new, and new kings are hard, and this one holds every weapon in the sky. Soften your speech. Send up an apology. I know him. I have standing. Let me go and plead your case. And in the meantime, for your own sake, stop saying the things you say into the wind, because words travel, and yours are making it worse. Know yourself, Ocean said, and adapt. That is not villainy. Write that down somewhere in yourself. That is arithmetic, the honest arithmetic of the survivor, and most of the world runs on it. And the world the survivor keeps is a real world with real mornings in it. The prisoner declined the arithmetic. He did it, the play says, almost gently, the way you refuse a kindness that was truly meant. Go home. Old friend, your errand would only bring the anger down on you as well, and mine is not for sale at that price. There was no speech about principle. He simply would not trade the one thing he still decided for the comfort it would buy. And Ocean looked at him a long moment, and understood that the arithmetic and the refusal came from two different worlds, and got back on the wind, and went home. The daughters stayed longer. Eventually, even they were gone. After that, no one came. Sit with the size of that. The ages I have been sliding under you. The snows, the wandering stars, all of them empty of a single voice. The most sought-after counselor in the history of the sky. The Mind Kings, queued for, spent whole civilizations' worth of time with no company but weather. And whether the stars were his companions through that, or his wardens, pacing out the sentence overhead in their perfect taut time. I told you once already tonight. Both. On this mountain the true things are always both. But the plains below were not empty. And this is what the chapter has been slowing down to show you. He could see the fires the whole time. Every night, of every year, of every age of the sentence. The world he paid for was spread out below him in lights. And the lights grew. He hung in the chains and watched the pattern thicken. Generation on generation. Watched single sparks become strings. Strings become clusters. Clusters bloom into steady glowing patches too bright to be any hearth. And understand what a patch like that means. That is a town. That is 1,000 hearths burning shoulder to shoulder. Which means granaries. Which means walls and wells and looms. Which means somewhere in there, on any given evening, 100 rooms of firelight with faces around them. Gold. Alive, twice over. He watched the smoke of the first great kilns stand up off the river valleys like grey pillars. Later, ages later, he watched harbour fires answer each other down a coastline, and pinpoints crawl out onto the black of the sea itself. Ships, carrying banked embers in clay pots past the sight of land. Sailing on the stars, he taught them. The king had chained the giver. Follow the king's logic all the way, and feel where it breaks. Seize the criminal, and the crime stops. It works on every criminal power ever arrested. It failed on this one. Completely. Because the crime was a gift. And a gift, once given, lives in the hands that received it. Nothing the Titan had handed down could be hauled back up the mountain and nailed beside him. The fire was 10,000 hearths deep and dividing nightly. The arts were in the blood, and the blood was Deucalion's, his own, self-renewing as the body on the cliff. Zeus had won custody of one Titan and lost custody of the future, and the future was down there on the plains, multiplying its lights, and the prisoner watched it do so every single night of the sentence. And no poet in the ancient world ever recorded one word of regret out of him. Search the sources. It is not there. Grief. Yes. Rage at the king. Plenty. The old drama shakes with it. Regret. The wish to take it back. The wish to have chosen otherwise and be free. Nowhere. Not one line in 30,000 years. So the ages passed. Empires of men rose on the plains. He watched, invented themselves, burned their bright patches wider, and fell. And the falling never lasted. The lights always came back, and other empires rose. The sky's wheel slid its slow inches. The ice walked down the gorge and walked back up, and the sentence stood at eternity minus nothing. The schedule, perfect. The mornings arriving, one after another, off an endless spool. Then, on an evening that began like 10,000 other evenings, something came toward the mountain that was not the eagle, and was not a god, and was not weather. It came slowly, from the west, along the broken country at the mountain's foot. It was small, and it was on the ground. And it moved the way nothing on this mountain had ever moved. Unevenly, staggering a few steps and stopping, pushing on again, driven and exhausted at once, and it could not stop walking. He heard it before he saw it clearly. Sound carries up a mountain at dusk, and what carried up was wrong in a way he had no file for, and he had a file for everything. Hooves, but not a herd. One animal, alone, at the edge of the world where no herd had ever strayed. And under the hooves, a voice, a girl's voice, ragged, talking to no one. The way people talk when they have been alone past the safe amount. And under the voice, constant, needling, a thin, high whine, wings, something small and vicious in the air around her. Never landing, never leaving. Then she came around the shoulder of the rock into the last light, and even the mind that noticed everything needed a moment. She had the shape of a heifer, a young cow, white, the old tellers say, footsore, flanks heaving, scored all over with the marks of travel no animal chooses. And she had the eyes of a girl. That is the impossible center of her, preserved in every version. The human eyes in the animal face, and the eyes were enormous, and exhausted, and aware, whatever had been done to her. Understand this first. She was in there, all of her. A girl was looking out. The old drama brings her to exactly this cliff. To him, and the meeting of these two is one of the strangest and saddest scenes in the whole surviving literature of that world. And tonight it is the last long memory before morning. So let it take its time. Her name was Io. Her story, she told him herself, in fragments, between spasms of the driving sting, and I will give it to you straighter than she could give it, but not softer, because softening it would falsify what this mountain is about to mean. She had been an ordinary girl in an ordinary place, Argus, green country, a river god's daughter, a life, and the king of the sky had noticed her. You know this king now. You have watched him work all night. The patience, the design, the way he moves when he wants something. He wanted her, and she was a mortal girl with no counselor and no fennel stalk and no move to make. And what he wanted, he took. Then the taking needed hiding, because there is a queen in the sky, and her jealousy is its own force of nature. And so, to hide the evidence, the girl was changed, wrapped in the heifer's shape. She lost her hands, her voice, her face, her name to anyone who looked at her, and gained nothing but hide and hooves and the eyes. And the queen was not fooled. The queen sent the gadfly. That is the small, vicious thing in the air around her. The whine that never stops. A sting, divinely commissioned, that will not let her rest. Feel what that sentence actually is, because it is engineered. And by now you are a connoisseur of this family's engineering. Not death. Nothing so quick. The sting lands whenever she stops. So she cannot stop, cannot graze in peace, cannot stand in a river's cool, cannot sleep, and could not, by then, have slept for months. She had been driven out of Argos, across Europe, over straits and mountains and unnamed rivers, wandering the whole map's worth of the world, and the tellers hung her name on the map as she passed. And one piece of it you know. The sea she was driven along at the far western start of her wandering is called the Ionian to this day. Hold that. It is not the last thing in this story named after somebody's suffering. So there they were, in the dying light at the edge of the world. And I want you to see the geometry of this meeting, because no two beings in existence could have understood each other better, and their situations were perfect opposites. He is fixed. She cannot stop. He has stood in one place so long the ice ages have walked past him. She has not been allowed one unbroken hour of stillness in months of driven wandering. His sentence is the rock. Hers is the road. And both sentences came from the same address, between the two of them. This evening, on this cliff, the king of the sky has used up both halves of what it means to be somewhere, staying and going. He poisoned each one and gave one to each of them. She asked him who he was. He told her, and the telling meant something coming from that cliff, because his story had traveled even where hers had, and she went still for a moment. Sting or no sting. Then she asked him the only question the truly desperate ever ask. Not why. Not who did this. She knew who did this. She asked, when does it end? And here is where the scene turns, and becomes the reason it survived, and the reason it is in this night, because she had asked, without knowing it, the one being in existence who could actually answer. Forethought looked at the exhausted girl in the animal's body, and did what he was. He looked down her road, all the way down, the way he looked down rivers, past the horizon of her hope, and further, and further, and then he began to tell her what he saw, and the old drama gives the telling entire, and it is not soft, and he did not soften it, and pay attention to that choice. He told her the road was still long. He named the lands ahead, the hard crossings, the strange peoples, far country after far country, an itinerary of suffering laid out plainly to its owner, because he would not lie to her. because a lie from him was impossible. In a way, it is not impossible for us. He could see, and comfort, built on a false map, is not comfort. It is abandonment, postponed, but the road ended. That was the spine of the prophecy, and he made sure she felt it holding everything. The road ended. In Egypt. At the Nile. There, he told her, the madness would lift. There the shape would leave her, and her own hands would come back to her, and her own face, and she would stand, a woman on the riverbank, free, and she would bear a son, and found a line, and the line would run down the generations, gathering kings. And then he told her the rest, the part she had not asked, the part he had been holding. You have to imagine the way an ember is held in a stalk, all these ages, banked, alive, waiting for its one appointed hearing. From your blood, he said, down your line, generations from tonight, counted and certain, a descendant of yours, of the son you will bear beside that river, will come to this mountain, an Asher, the strongest the earth will ever carry, and he will set me free. Sit where she sat, one moment, and take that in the way she had to take it, the tormented, comforting the tormented, with the future itself, the chained one, telling the driven one, your suffering and mine are not two accidents. They are one design, and the design has a flaw in it, and the flaw is you. Every mile you are being driven, every sting, is carrying my freedom away down your road to Egypt, to a riverbank, to a cradle, to a line of kings. And at the end of the line it turns around and comes back for me with a bow. He was strapped to the proof of the king's power, telling the king's other victim that she was the seed of its undoing. Nobody in all of Greek myth holds a stranger contract than those two. On that rock, at that hour, and neither of them would live in the ordinary sense to see it honored. And both of them, from that hour, carried it. Then the sting found her again. You could see it take her. The old drama plays it out. The whine, the spasm, the eyes going wide with the madness of it, and her legs moving before her will could even object. She went from him the way she came, staggering, driven, down off the shoulder of the rock and away east along the roof of the world, her voice trailing back, and then just the hooves, and then the wind. He watched her go. It was all he could do. It was, you understand by now, the only thing on earth he could do. And he did it completely, the way he did everything. He watched until the small white shape was gone into the dark of the east, carrying his freedom in her blood, 13 generations deep, where no king could see it, and no eagle could reach it, and no chain in the universe could pin it to any rock. The eagle came at dawn, the way it always came. It had no idea. It had just been given a deadline. We are back. Now, fully back. The memories are done. The night has caught up to itself, and it is the coldest hour on the mountain, the hour before the pale, when the wind drops and the stars burn hardest, and everything alive in the world is at its lowest ebb. Your hour, if you are still awake to hear this, the hour the body forgets it ever intended anything. And in that hour, tonight, there is someone on the mountain, not the eagle. The dark is still the truce, and holds. This comes down the air out of the high sky, unhurried, sure-footed on nothing, and stops, standing on the empty wind before the cliff face as easily as you would stand in a doorway, slim, quick-eyed, winged at the heels, carrying the way he has carried since the world was new, a message, Hermes, the god of deliveries. You have met his work twice tonight. He set the shameless mind in Pandora's breast, and he led her down the mountain to Afterthought's door. When the king of the sky needs something conveyed, aimed, and left ticking, this is who he sends. And he has been sent. And to understand the message, you need the last secret of the night, the one I have kept back, the way its owner kept it back. Here it is. All this long night I have told you what Forethought saw. The war's winner. Before the war. The flood. Before the rain. Eo's river bank. Her son. The archer at the end of her line. But the longest sight of all. The furthest thing that mind ever read. I have not told you. And it is this. He had looked down the king's own road. There is a marriage. Out there in the future. A goddess of the sea. And the tellers who finish the story name her Thetis. Though on the mountain, that night, the name was the whole treasure. She is beautiful, and courted, and the king himself has considered her, in his way, and it is written into the deep grain of things, the level below the gods, the level even they cannot amend, that the son born of that marriage will be greater than his father. Feel the size of that in this particular universe, greater than his father. The whole history of the sky is one sentence repeating, Cronus overthrew Uranus. Zeus overthrew Cronus. The wheel has turned twice. Father under son, and every power in creation quietly assumes it has stopped, because the current king is the strongest thing there has ever been, and the current king knows the wheel better than anyone, because he is standing on it. He rules. You have watched him rule all night, like a man listening for a tread on the stair. If he takes the wrong bride, the tread is his own son's. Which bride? That is the whole question of the future. And in all the reaches of creation, one mind knew the answer. And the mind was chained to a rock at the edge of the world, on the king's own order, with nothing left to bargain except the one sentence the king could not live without. So now you can read the message that has come down the cold air tonight. And it is short. The old drama preserves the confrontation, and it crackles even on the page. 25 centuries old. The messenger does not ask. He demands, in the name of the Father. The voice of an errand boy dressed in an empire. You know things. The king knows you know them. Name the marriage. Say the name. And the sky is open to negotiation. Refuse. And there are worse things than a cliff. And he lists them. And the list is genuinely terrible. Darkness under the earth. Ages of it. And after the ages. Worse. Understand what is actually being weighed on this mountain, in this hour, because it is the true summit of the whole story. Higher than the theft. Higher than the flood. Every power in the universe is on one side of the scale. Thunder, chain, the eagle, the pit, time itself in whatever quantity the king cares to spend. And on the other side of the scale is one name. Inside, one mind. And the mind will not open. He refused. Read the refusal rightly. Though, or the night teaches you the wrong thing. This is not stubbornness, the blind mule strength of a creature that cannot yield. You watched him yield once tonight, at the council of the Titans, walking away from his own kind when staying was hopeless. He knows exactly how to fold a losing hand. This hand was not losing. That is the cold, clean heart of it, chained, starved of company, worked by the mornings for ages past counting. He still held the single card in the deck that outranked the thunder, and both players knew it. And the card was appreciating every age that passed without the name. The king's unease compounded. The prisoner had read this, too. All of it, from the beginning. from before the Fennel stalk. The sentence, the ages, this messenger, this hour. He had seen that a day would come when the sky would need him more than he needed the sky. And his whole imprisonment, understood from far enough up, was one long wait for the market to turn. The old drama gives him the answer he sent back up, and it is one of the great sentences of the ancient stage. He said he would not trade his hard fortunes for that servitude. Meaning, look at me, and look at you. I am chained to a rock, and I am freer than the errand you are running. And then, the drama says, he told the messenger to bring it on. The lightning, the convulsion, the pit, the whole arsenal. Let the king spend all of it. Nothing he owns, nothing he can build, borrow, or breed will drag the name out of me before I choose to say it. I have seen the end of this, and you have not, and that asymmetry is the whole of what I am, and it is not for sale tonight. And the king spent it. The play ends in the spending. The messenger withdraws. The sky goes wrong, and the last thing the old audience saw was the cosmos itself convulsing around one unyielding point. Thunder, past thunder, the mountain heaving, the prisoner calling the elements to witness what is done to him, and then rock and titan and secret together, going down into the dark, whole, unopened. His, now, honesty, the kind we have kept all night. The old drama was one play of three. The second and third are lost. A handful of quoted lines, a few reported titles, and silence. Somewhere in that lost middle, across some span of further ages and darker prisons, the two of them found their way from that storm to a bargain, and how it was walked, step by step, no living soul knows, and I will not invent it for you. What every surviving tradition agrees on is where it ended. The name was spoken, at last, at a price, and the price was freedom, and the sky heard the name and acted on it. And Thetis, the sea goddess, the loveliest danger in creation, was married in haste and some sorrow to a mortal man, so that her son, however great, would be born beneath the gods, no threat to any throne. She bore that mortal a boy. In time, you know the boy, swift-footed, bright, doomed, the terror of Troy, Achille, which is a whole other night, and the wheel of overthrown fathers, the wheel that had turned twice and frightened even its rider, stopped, for good, one turn short, stopped by a sentence, spoken from a rock, by the being the wheel's owner had spent 30,000 years trying to break. The sky is turning grey at the edge now. You can see it from the cliff, the faintest paling out over the east, the stars going reluctant above it. You know what the grey hour brings. It has brought the same thing every morning for 30,000 years. Hold still. This morning is not like the other mornings. He knew before the light could have told anyone anything. Understand what 30,000 mornings do to a watcher like this one. The speck that comes up out of the sunrise had risen into his eyes more times than there are grains in a field. And he knew its flight, the way you know, a key turning in your own front door. The pitch of it, the timing, the exact line it takes off the ridge. Knowing was the sentence. And so, this morning, while the coming thing was still only a fault in the grey, a grain of dark where the sun would be, he had already read it, and everything in him had gone still, in a way the mountain had never once felt. It was flying wrong, too low. The eagle rode the high wind off the peaks, always. Entitled, Effortless, this came along the shoulder of the country, hugging the broken ground. Too slow, too heavy. It moved in surges, with rests in it, like breath, like effort, like something climbing, and it was not alone. There was a shape under it, around it, carrying it. The dark grain resolved out of the grey, nearer, larger, and it was not a wing at all. It was a man, on foot, coming up the last impossible stretches of scree in the half-light with the steadiness of somebody who has walked out of the far side of every terrible thing the world could arrange. Huge through the shoulders, wrapped against the cold in a hide, and the hide, as the light came up, was tavne, maned, alions, worn like a coat with the great head lolling at the shoulder. In one fist, a club, slung at his back, a bow, and the prisoner, watching him come, did the arithmetic he had done once before at this cliff, in front of a girl with human eyes, and the arithmetic came out finished. 13 generations, counted from a riverbank in Egypt, from a woman standing restored in the reeds with her own hands again, her son, her son's sons, gathering kings, the way a river gathers water, down through Argos, down through names that would fill their own nights, down to a birth in Thebes that shook heaven, to a life of labours that emptied the world of monsters, one impossible errand at a time. Heracles, her blood, arriving on schedule. I told you once tonight that the rescue was not a hero's happy accident. And here is the proof of it. Climbing, he was in these mountains on an errand. The tellers say, deep in his labours, bound east for the garden at the world's edge, and the road of his labour bent past this cliff because it had been bent that way, ages in advance, by a promise spoken to his grandmother, 13 generations deep in his own blood. Forethought had seen this man from the far side of 30,000 years, had named him to Io while the gadfly whined, and now the far side had arrived, breathing hard, in the grey of morning, exactly on time, and stopped, and looked up at the cliff, and the two of them regarded each other, the seer and the seen, the promise and its keeping. What they said, the old sources do not give us, and I will not put words in either mouth. What happened next? They give us plainly. The east caught fire with the ordinary sunrise, and out of it, on the ordinary schedule, entitled Effortless, riding the high wind for the 30,000th time, and the last, came the eagle. The man moved the way the great archers are said to move, without hurry, as if the moment had been rehearsed. And, for him, in a way, it had, his whole life of labours being one long rehearsal for impossible shots. The bow came off the shoulder, the string came back. Hold the picture 1 heartbeat, because the ancient world held it for centuries, the bird of the sentence, black against the risen sun, beginning its long bank down toward the appointment it had kept since before human memory. The man on the scree, drawn, aiming up into the light. 1 arrow. The old tellers keep it at 1. It went up the morning like a thrown spark, and the schedule broke in the air, and the eagle of 30,000 mornings folded around the shaft and dropped, down the whole face of the mountain, past the prisoner it would never touch again, into the gorge, gone, the whine of wind through its wings, the shadow, the appointment, all of it, gone, and what was left was so unfamiliar that even the wind seemed to stand off the cliff a moment. No, next morning, after 30,000 of them, none. Then the man climbed the last pitch to the anchors, and set himself, and broke the chains, the fastenings that the best hands in the universe had wept while setting. He shattered, wedge by wedge, link by link, the mountain ringing its last iron sounds out over the gorge. And this time, the echoes were coming apart instead of going in, and the king of the sky, watching from the high air, let it happen. That is in the oldest teller, plain as anything. And it is the final measure of everything you have learned tonight about how that mind works. The name had been paid. The marriage was averted. The wheel stopped. The account settled. And here was his own most glorious son, the strongest thing the mortal world would ever produce, standing on the mountain, having freed heaven's oldest prisoner with one arrow. The old poet says Zeus allowed it so that the glory of Heracles might be the greater. A king to the last. Even his relenting was an investment. So the ledger, at the end, read like this, and no line of it is simple. The Titan walked free. The king kept his throne. Forever now. The last succession crisis in the history of the sky, dissolved by the very mind he had chained. Thetis married her mortal, and grieved, and bore Achilles. And that grief is another night. Everybody won something. Everybody paid something. The old world did not do clean endings. It did true ones. But there was one more term, and it is the strangest, smallest, best-kept detail in the whole story, and almost nobody alive knows it. And it is for you. Now, at the edge of sleep, the sentence had been forever. A king's word, spoken before the universe, cannot simply be unsaid, or the word of kings is wind. So a remedy was found, and the later tellers preserve it with a straight face, and I will give it to you the same way. The Titan was required to wear, for all the rest of time, a ring, iron, forged from a link of his own chains, and set into the iron, a chip of grey stone from the cliff of the Caucasus, so that, in the sky's official ledger, he is bound still. He carries his mountain with him, a prison the size of a fingertip, the sentence miniaturized, honored and utterly defeated, riding on the hand of a free being until the end of everything. And the Greeks, who could not leave a detail like that alone, said, this is where it comes from, the human habit, the band of metal, the set stone, worn on the finger, every ring with a stone in it, they said, is a small copy of that first one, a keepsake of the sentence served for us. Look at your own hand, there in the dark. If there is a ring on it, you may be wearing the end of this story, and never once have been told. Now the last thing, come off the mountain with me. The story is over. This is just the walk home. An ember, in the pith of a fennel stalk, carried downhill in the dark. You were there, a flame standing up off dry moss in a doorway, two faces lit from below, a boy's palm, held at the exact border of the warmth, a branch, carried at a run to the next cave, and that carrying, we said it then, was the whole invention. Fire you can keep is warmth. Fire you can pass is a future. So watch it pass, hearth to hearth, horn to clay pot, valley to valley, up the rivers, over the passes, onto the ships, down the whole spread of the ages, hand to hand to hand to hand. No gap anywhere in the relay. 30,000 years of shielded palms and banked coals, and someone, always, somewhere, getting up in the night to feed the fire, and it is still moving. You have seen it move, every 4th year, on television, in your own living room. A flame is kindled in Greece, at Olympia, in the old, sacred country, lit from the sun itself by a curved mirror. No match, no lighter. Fire taken straight from the sky, exactly the way it was taken the first time. And think about this now as you drift. The whole world does the one thing with it that the whole world can still agree on. It is handed, burning, from one human being to another, runner to runner, hand to hand, across nations, across oceans, past every border on earth, tended, shielded, never allowed to go out, while the species stands along the roadsides and cheers. 4 billion people watching a relay of strangers do the oldest thing we know how to do, and almost none of them could tell you why it moves them. And every one of them is moved. We are reenacting the handoff. We have never stopped reenacting it. It is the closest thing the species has to a memory of the night the ember came downhill. And the smallest runner in the relay is in your house. He watched the fires below him for 30,000 years. Tonight one of them is yours. Sleep now. The watch is kept. Good night.